Anyone know where Councilman Weekly is? All right, ladies and gentlemen, the March 14, 2007 special meeting of the City Council is called to order. This meeting has been properly noticed and posted in compliance with the open meeting law. These proceedings are being presented live on KCLV Cable Channel 2 and are closed captioned for our hearing impaired viewers. The council meeting, as well as all other KCLV programming, can be viewed on the internet at www.kclv.tv. The proceedings will be rebroadcast on Friday at 6 p.m., Saturday 2 p.m., and Tuesday at 10 a.m. And of course, you all know that the building is protected by a state-of-the-art detection and suppression sprinkler system, and if alarms should activate during today's meeting, please evacuate using the exits. Once outside, assemble on the Las Vegas Boulevard side of the property, and employees wearing safety vests or city marshals will inform you when it's safe to re-enter the building. Thank you. Before we move on to our agenda, would everyone please rise for the pledge? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. All right, before we call the first item, I'd like to excuse Dr. Selby, who's in Washington, D.C. at the annual Congressional City Conference and will be returning this evening. Deputy City Manager Steve Houchins will present some opening comments on Dr. Selby's behalf. This is perhaps of all of the budget workshops that we've had, this ranks as one of the most important, if not the most important. As you know, the C-tax, the consolidated tax, from which we derive much of the monies that we use to provide services to our constituents, has decreased, and we have to be looking at ways, unfortunately, to be able to address that problem, because you can't do something with nothing, unfortunately. And we're going to be asking, I believe, at the end of the day, even though all of the city employees work so very, very hard and do such a great job on behalf of our constituents, even to do more with less. That appears to be the message that's going to be sent to us. So please listen very carefully. We're going to welcome your input. We want to hear from everybody here who believes that they're able to help us in solving this situation. As I say, we're not in a state of an emergency. It's not dire at this point, but prudence dictates that we look very, very carefully as to where we're going as a city based on the current economic structure. So, Mr. Houchins, would be happy to hear your opening remarks.
Thank you, Your Honor. Okay.
Perhaps I should call the agenda item.
Okay.
This is item number 4, discussion and possible action regarding the fiscal year 2008 City of Las Vegas operating and capital project budget requests. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Your Honor and members of the City Council, today is the date that we set aside for our annual review of the budget workshop. As you know, each time about this year, we share our progress on the development of this year's budget and next year's budget, and critically receive the needed input from the City Council about your priorities, your needs, and your concerns. Following the workshop, we will go back and make revisions to our budget proposal to incorporate your input and bring a final budget to you at a formal budget hearing on May 15th, 2007. City staff has been working since December preparing the city budget for the next fiscal year, which begins July 1. They have been determining staffing requirements, assessing program needs, defining capital projects, and establishing annual maintenance requirements to support our growing city population. At the same time, the Finance Department has been closely monitoring key revenue indicators to forecast our ability to fund these many requests. Our Chief Financial Officer, Mark Vincent, will provide more detail on both the needs and the revenues of the city. But first, I would like to take a few moments to offer some remarks on behalf of Dr. Selby as we go into the workshop with you today. In recent briefings with the members of the Council, we have been regularly reporting the lack of growth in accordance with what the mayor said, the lack of growth in our dominant general fund revenue source, the consolidated tax. In fact, the latest report indicates that the cumulative revenue growth for this fiscal source is a very weak 0.4% through the month of December. That's virtually nil. The lack of growth is due in large part to a slowdown in residential housing market after a few years of what could only be characterized as an extreme frenzy in building and buying properties. We are concerned because the consolidated tax represents over half of our general fund revenues, and these revenues pay for a majority of city operations, including public safety, public works, maintenance and operations, and a wide variety of programs that the city provides to its citizens. The good news is that as a result of continuous efforts to operate more efficiently, we have not spent as much up to this point of the year as we normally would have. Dr. Selby asked our department, several months ago, Dr. Selby asked our department heads to tentatively forego beginning any new programs or initiative, even though they might have been included in last year's budget. These actions, combined with a critical review and evaluating the justification for refilling vacant employee positions, will allow us to finish the current fiscal year in a positive balance, albeit small, but with some degree of comfort. However, our bigger challenge is for the next year, for fiscal year beginning July 1, 2007. We remain optimistic, as do members of the business and development communities, that we should see a recovery in the coming year. There are many positive indicators, such as strong growth in jobs, new resort properties coming online, the continuing growth in tourism, continued investment interest from financial markets. All of these support our belief that we will see our revenues resume a stable growth pattern. However, we don't know when or to what degree we will see this recovery. So we're approaching this next year's budget with a certain degree, a large degree in fact, of conservatism and frugality. This doesn't mean we're bringing the city to a screeching halt. Far from it. We will continue with the planned and funded development of over 100 capital projects totaling some $339 million. However, we have to worry about the cost of maintenance and operations that are associated with these projects. We should recall that since 1999 we have developed 560 acres of new parks and trails within the city. In the last 5 years, Public Works has completed 424 lane miles of roadways. Service demands are further increased by the construction of many projects, such as are found in the developing communities in Summerlin, at Kyle Canyon, and elsewhere in the Northwest, as well as other areas in the city. Notwithstanding our concerns, we will continue to honor our contractual relationships with our employees, with our vendors and suppliers, with our consultants. We will continue to provide programs and services to the citizens of Las Vegas, and we will even initiate new programs where they show the potential to generate revenue or reduce operating costs. A major challenge will be to open the several new facilities scheduled to come online during this fiscal year and to assume management of the operations of Floyd Lamb Park. In his presentation, Mr. Vincent will seek your feedback on some ideas that we've discussed with city department heads that will provide a way for us to achieve these objectives. All these options and compromises are compromises from what we see as our real needs and preferences in providing services to our citizens. In short, next year will challenge our staff in many ways, but mostly because they will not be able to provide the level of service that they believe and we believe that our citizens deserve and have come to expect. We believe that we should be prepared to tell our citizens to expect a possible reduction in some service levels in certain areas until we see revenues recover. We are optimistic that we can utilize a number of initiatives, such as our performance management training that will be discussed in a few moments, Citizen Advisory Committee on Fire Safety, energy conservation programs, public-private partnerships, improved relationships with our bargaining units, and innovative thinking by our excellent employees will help us through this temporary budget challenge. There are two aspects to the budget process. One is the dollars and cents of balancing the budget and ensuring that the city retains its financial stability and integrity during these challenging times. And Mr. Mark Vincent will provide you with this information very shortly. The other key component of the budget process is the strategic business planning that is vital to the success of the organization, be it public or private. Your strategic plan calls for the creation of a performance-based budgeting process. That involves the coordination of the components of a working, breathing performance plan that accurately and meaningfully measures the operational success of the organization. The city has engaged key departments in a creation and development of Performance Plus. That is a program that provides city staff with tools to manage for positive results. Ms. Fretwell has been instrumental in the implementation of this program. And before we bring Mr. Vincent to the dais, I would like to ask the council to recognize Ms. Fretwell, who will present the Performance Plus program to you this morning for your review. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Houchin. Ms. Fretwell?
Morning, Mayor and members of the council. I'll go through this very quickly because I know that you have a lot of things that you want to talk about this morning, but I think it's also important to kind of keep some of what needs to be discussed this morning in perspective with how we're trying to follow through on the direction you provided us last year. What I'd like to cover quickly this morning is what is Performance Plus? Why are we implementing it? What is the timeline and what can you expect? Last year, you'll remember that we were directed at one of our budget sessions to create a pilot performance measurement and performance-based budgeting process. And we committed to you that we would do that with 3 departments: municipal court, fire and rescue, and detention and enforcement. And I would like to report to you that we tried very diligently for the first 6 months of this year to make that work. But we found that in review, after about 3 to 4 months, that we really needed to have a little more of a systematic approach. And I'll describe a little bit of why as I describe the planning cycle that Performance Plus creates for us. About 10 years ago, we started doing strategic planning. And then about 6 years ago, we added into that business planning. And all along the way, we've had fits and starts of various levels of performance measurement, whether it be participating in ICMA performance measures, providing key measurement indicators to you on a quarterly basis, which we provide in your workshops, and regular reports to the council. And we decided that with all of those things working together, we needed to have an integrated approach. Many people didn't understand how the strategic plan linked to a business plan, much less how it related to a performance measure, whether that performance measure was the cost that it takes to pave a lane mile or whatever. Things didn't seem to make sense. So the circle that's presented before you today shows how this stuff is supposed to work together. And what I'd like to say is that we are focusing in on the planning for results arrow, budgeting for results arrow, and the performance data collection and reporting results arrows first. Not that we won't do the rest of this, and not that by doing those 4 we have to wait to implement some of the other arrows. It's just that that's where we've decided to focus our effort first. Why do we want to do this? What is this Performance Plus effort? One, it's kind of related to what I said a couple of minutes ago. We want to make sure that we have meaningful measures that are meaningful to all of our customers. You, the citizens, the executive team, and the employees. So we need to make sure that those meaningful measures also align to what you've told us you want to have accomplished. If you set out your 8 strategic priorities, we need to be proving that we're accomplishing those. We also need to have data collection systems that support it and performance information in our budget so that you know as you're making budgeting decisions how those things impact us. You know, we're at a unique place in the city's history because of our years of experience in trying to implement these systems. We've done some really good things. If you reflect back on Doug's comments from August of 2006 during his annual review, there were significant savings, significant efficiencies, tremendous improvements in our programs and our processes. We'd gone through a 12-program intensive review to try and identify places that we could streamline, reduce duplication, eliminate things that were unnecessary, and we made huge strides in doing that. Just in the last year, for instance, we've been focusing in on things like our consumer-driven health plan, which over the course of 2006 saved us $2.3 million. In a year where everybody else is budgeting for a 12% increase in their health care costs, we're looking at zero. So what I'm saying to you is that although this budget message today may seem pretty dour, a lot of our systems that are currently in place are trying to do the best with the dollars that we do have and making the most impact with the dollars that we do have. And we think that this system will help us get better at doing what we've already been doing well. We like to say that we want to start with the end in mind, so that we stay focused on things that are important to you. And this is relevant to your budgeting discussion today, I think, that the performance measures justify the expenditures, that we're able to stand up here and tell you what you're going to get out of it when you allocate funds, that we're meeting your expectations for information, that we're linking performance to resources, and that we're able to drive resource allocations based on performance and the strategic plans that you've identified with and for us. And it also gives some accountability to the customers, to the citizens out there. There's several cities and counties and other governments that have gone through a Performance Plus-like effort. And I thought you might be interested in seeing some of the reasons why. 60% of the officials that are doing this feel they're better able to meet the expectations of their community through their finances and through their resource allocations. This is a recognized best practice. You're going to create accountability with our customers, not only for us, but so that we can report to our citizens what we're accomplishing. And it takes your shared vision as a council, the mayor and council, and pushes it all the way through our organization in a clear and concise way so that it's meaningful to every person in our workforce. Here's just a list of some of the various organizations that are using a Performance Plus-like program, measuring for results. It's a pretty good list of comparable communities. And over $25 billion worth of assets and funding that are encompass this budgeting for results component. This is the process. You've got 6 departments going through this right now. It doesn't look easy, and it's not. And it's very thought-provoking, but at the end of the day, we'll have a systematic way to look at what everybody's doing, and everybody knows how they fit in the picture. And we'll have a much better sense of what lines of business are we in? What programs do we have? How does that impact our outcomes? As you can see here, each strategic business plan will focus on services, programs, and lines of business. This will help us drive a much more efficient budgeting process, as well as a much more outcome-oriented planning process. We also will have measures, so that when you say, if we change this, what does that do? We're hoping to be able to tell you what it does, so that you're not making a decision in a vacuum or based on just intuition. You'll actually have some hard data with which you'll be able to make some hard decisions, hopefully. So where are we in this process? We've got 6 departments underway right now. The 3 the three pilot departments that I mentioned earlier, detention and enforcement, fire and rescue, and municipal court. Add to that finance and business services, human resources, and information technology. Those are the first six out of the gate. They all will have their plans, their strategic business plans completed in April, and the allocations that you provide for operating budgets for those departments will be in this new Performance Plus budgeting alignment by the beginning of next fiscal year. That's our goal. We will also begin to roll out very quickly the remaining 10 or so departments, and we'll stagger them, but hopefully we'll be able to get them through so that we're ready for complete implementation by 2010. When we're all said and done with this, we're hoping for more informed budget, strategic, and policy decisions, that we're able to get you the right information at the right time with the right level of detail, so that you feel comfortable making more of those decisions. Our customers will receive additional information demonstrating accountability and transparency, which goes right back to our accessible government priority. The manager's office will receive more concise information on a regular basis that impacts how we're doing and our strategic and enterprise-wide decisions. And hopefully our resource allocations will be based on the results that our customers want. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have about that program. We're well underway. I wish, given where we are today, that we had made this decision a year ago to go with a systematic approach instead of trying the pilot. But I assure you we'll continue to strive to implement this and to have the benefits of this rollout by next budget cycle.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions of Ms. Fretwell at this time? Yes, Councilman Brown.
Thank you, Your Honor. As far as the program goes, did you and Dr. Selby talk to the directors as far as the assumptions before we get into all this measurement, and more specifically, just a basic question of the role of government? You know, what the city of Las Vegas should be doing as far as services and programs, and or did we just kind of accept what we do today is okay to go through this performance measurement process?
Well, I think there's a couple of things that are going on. Through the process, each department goes through an intensive series of days of dialogue about mission, why are you doing what you're doing, and to what end. And I think, Councilman, what we're finding is that the essence of that question is being answered department by department. If we're in this business, why are we doing that? Mark has an example I know he's going to share with you from his own personal experience with his department that I think is really will illustrate how we're getting to the nut. What are we supposed to be doing? How well are we doing it? What are those things that are the nice to-dos? What are those things that we are doing that we're doing because we aren't doing our mission as well as we could be? And I think if we can get that kind of clarity from top to bottom in every department that participates in this, you're going to start seeing a lot of the why are we in this business discussion really coming to a head. And you'll see it in these performance measures. Because if there's not consistency in our approach, if it's not clearly linked to our mission, there are probably going to be some things that we're walking back to you guys in briefings and saying, we're not sure we need to be doing this any longer. We don't know how it started. We don't know why it started. We spent X amount of time and resources on doing it, and we don't get any result from it. Or we don't get the right kind of result for it, and we could get more if we could reallocate to this mission-critical function. So I think we're getting there, Councilman. I think one of the beauties of this system is that our last 6 years of trying to do strategic planning, business planning, and performance measurement has pretty much been a top-down approach. I mean, I personally had a real eye-opening experience when we were doing our planning effort for the rollout of this, because I thought what we were getting done was being assimilated into the organization at every level, and it wasn't. So this is much more of I don't mean to imply that people weren't listening and weren't trying. I think they were. But this is much more of an inclusive approach where you've got all hands on deck working on all of this so that we're hearing from the front line all the way up to the top leadership of a department talking about what is their mission, what services support that mission, and to what end do those services provide to our customers, the council, the citizens, our leadership. What are we providing through this process? I don't know, Mark, if you want to share your example, it might help answer the councilman's question.
That was excellent, Betsy. I appreciate that.
Actually, Betsy stole a lot of what I was going to tell you. Our department, Finance, is one of the 3 departments that's already gone through the first 9 steps of this process. It's very labor-intensive. It takes a lot of time and effort, but the reason for that is the payback. Probably a third to a quarter of my staff has been involved in the various phases we've gone through, and I say staff all the way down to our technicians that process accounts payable, for example. And the reason why that's important is exactly what Betsy said. Our employees have to take ownership of our strategic business plan. They have to take ownership of the planning process, and they need to be involved in it, and they need to have a stake in it. And one of the things that happens as you go through this process, you start having these discussions about what is our purpose, what are the services we're delivering, and that creates an interesting dialogue, and oftentimes there's disagreement. In fact, disagreement's a good thing, I suppose. It helps us to sharpen ourselves a little bit. And we had a particular situation that Betsy's referring to, one that I happened to get involved in at the tail end, was a discussion about what is the purpose of accounts payable. There is a feeling that in addition to making sure people are paid timely and accurately, there's also a purpose of providing information. But how do you measure, if that's one of the services you provide, how do you measure the providing of information? We started talking about it, and I said, well, why are you providing information? Who are you providing it to? Betsy mentioned this is customer driven, which is another interesting aspect of this. This is all about looking at our performance from our customer's perspective, and our customer certainly can be the council, but it certainly can be the general public. It can be other departments that we provide services to. So it's a look at not from what I think you should get from me, but what you expect from me. And when you take that approach, it starts to make some interesting conversation. When I asked about why do we feel that providing information is a service, well, you find out that it's because when people aren't paid timely, or when they aren't paid accurately, or when the payment perhaps is not recorded accurately, people ask questions, and then you have to respond. And I simply asked, well, if you focused more on getting it accurate and timely to begin with, the information takes care of itself. And it does. And so it actually took some discussion to get through that says, okay, our mission is not to provide information. Our mission is to pay accurately and timely. And it focused them. And I think that's just a small example of some of the things that have been coming out of the process. And again, it's not just a director or a city manager directing it and say this is as it will be. These are the rank and file folks thinking it through for themselves and asking themselves questions about what is their purpose and what are they supposed to be doing. And so I'm very excited about it. I know the staff that's gone through it has been very appreciative of it. They've enjoyed it. It's caused us to think a little bit differently about what we're doing. And the other thing that perhaps wasn't mentioned is this process also has a corporate review process, which probably speaks to something you're about to ask me. I can see the wheels turning. When we start looking at a service delivery, what we start to find out is sometimes a service delivery is not aligned properly, or there's some organizational conflicts. Why does this department think that this is a service delivery that they should be doing when this other department over here is already doing it, or thinks that they're responsible for it? So there's a corporate review that happens at a high level that begins to ask the question, are we organized organizationally in such a manner that makes sense where the alignments are? Because one of the issues that this also does is it also holds us accountable. If you align your services into programs, and a program has a program manager, that manager is responsible for that service delivery. If you take the service delivery and you start peppering it through other organizations, who's responsible for it?
And on the service delivery, so this process identifies, before we even get into the analysis, whether that service or program fits the mission of City Hall.
If you look at the chart that I just flipped back to, the structure for the business plans, you can see the level of data we're going to be getting to. And one of the things that we felt was the right place to focus our review in is at the line of business level. And Absolutely. I mean, one of the things we've struggled with for the last, I don't know, as long as I've been working here is how do you compare an apple to an orange, and what is the outcome? This gets all the apples to be compared to apples. Now, you may be doing a different type of business, and you may have some specific outcomes that you anticipate, but the impact of expanding a program or curtailing a program or realigning a program becomes much more apparent with this kind of level of detail. I know, Councilman Brown, you and I have had discussions about this, and many others of you, about the fact that we have pockets of information right now. You say, I want to know, Councilman Wilson will say, I want to know what the impact of covered pools are on the city of Las Vegas. So we go and we figure out what the impact is, who uses it, how much it costs, how much are utilities, how much is staff, how much blah, blah. We do all that detailed work. But we don't have a systematic approach that allows us to compare those usage numbers and those operational numbers associated with covered pools with seasonal pools without doing the same thing. So what we're trying to do is build a database that allows us to access that kind of information easily so that we can do exactly what you're talking about. We can say, well, here's the biggest bang for the buck, or here's what the investment level is for this outcome. So that as you're making resource decisions and providing direction to us and authorizing budgets and all those other things, you have the whole kit and caboodle. You're not working on one piece of the puzzle and not having the rest of the piece of the puzzle available for your review and evaluation.
Excellent, but even go earlier in the process, and let's use that as an example. It's not the best one for my question, but somewhere in this process, do we ask the question, should we be in the covered pool business, and who are we serving?
The neat thing about this is that for new things, yes, but it also provides us an opportunity for all the existing programs to look at how they stack up. And I've kind of been responding to all the existing programs and how they stack up. But this gives us an ability when Department A, B, or C comes in and says, I'll just give you an example. I'll pick on Karen because it's easy. Karen requested at least 8 marshals. I think she wanted 10. We whittled it down to 8, and we're not going to recommend any of them today. But she said, I need 8 marshals, and there's 2 things I'll be able to do with that. I will be able to go to 24/7 coverage, which we do not have with our marshals right now, and we will be able to accommodate the new parks that came online with that staff complement. That's a new program. We don't do 24/7 coverage right now. This will allow us to fit that into how the marshals have been performing over time, so that when we come up here and we stand here and we talk to you about whether it should be 10 or 8 or 2, it's not arbitrary, it's not necessarily intuitively driven, and it can be compared to 2 code enforcement officers and the impact of adding 2 code enforcement officers versus 2 marshals. But so from a program expansion standpoint, yes, which means new programs go through the same process.
Okay, last quick comment and the last question for this issue. So what I'm hearing is the X amount, fill in the blank, of programs/services offered at the City of Las Vegas to our public, external and internal, is part of the evaluation as far as are they needed.
Yes.
Then what are the 6 departments that are rolling out the first go-around?
Fire, detention and enforcement, municipal court, finance, IT, information technologies, and human resources.
Okay, great. Thank
Now,
you.
and we pick those on we've got that's the largest share of our budget, those public safety departments. And the 3 internal departments are strategic to our success in this process. So they need to know how they fit into the puzzle. And I have not heard one department. We have asked them to commit an enormous amount of time to this process since January. Enormous. During a budget cycle, during legislature, et cetera. And although people have said, oh, I can't believe I've got to leave the office for 3 days and go focus solely on Performance Plus. But to a person, when they walk back to their office and they call or email or share their thoughts, they say that was the best time. It was well spent and worth it. So I think we're on the right track, and I really do think it's going to give you the information at a higher level of confidence and a degree of comprehensiveness that will make it easier for you to make decisions. And it doesn't mean that we can't get that data now. It's just a lot of effort to get it. This will make it much easier and a part of how we do business.
Recognizing that this is a dynamic concept and not static, when can we expect to see some of these performance measurement standards so we can begin to evaluate as a council?
We have, the rollout, Mayor, is that we intend to have the first 6 strategic business plans for those departments done in April. We will go through that corporate review that Mark indicated. That will probably happen between April and June. Our goal is to have those 6 operational budgets into next year's budget. So you will have all of these components that I outlined for you for those 6 departments in next year's budget, so the 07-08 budget. We're hoping that we will be able to get another 5 departments through prior to next budget cycle. So they will probably begin sometime June, July, August. And then we'll start the last group of departments sometime in January, February-ish of 08, which puts us in line to have everyone with a performance plus strategic business plan based budget in your 09-010 budget.
Is there a reward component in your analysis? In other words, if we have measurement standards and there's accountability, at a certain point, does the employee feel that he's going to be rewarded if, in fact, he exceeds that which is expected?
Well, let me tell you one of the pieces of the puzzle we still have to work out, and I think it'll answer your question. If you look back at this circle, Mayor, that's up on the screen, there's an orange arrow called Employee Performance Management. That is the link that you're talking about. And ideally, we want to get there. We've had preliminary discussions with our union leadership. They're aware that we're rolling this out. We purposely put this off into a next phase of implementation because we felt like achieving your goal of really getting you the kind of data that you've been asking for a couple of years now was critically important. And we also wanted the employees to get a feel for this whole system and how it works and get a comfort level with it before we start talking about that in any detail. But I'll tell you, I think that people will be really receptive to the idea of knowing where they fit, how what they do every day contributes to our overall accomplishments, and what that means for them. And this could help us as we move forward in recognizing individuals, compensating them appropriately, and making sure that all of our systems are aligned, not just our business plans and our strategic business plans and our budgets, but how we interact with our employees, how we reward and recognize them, how we compensate them. It's a critical piece of the puzzle, but it's next. It's not right now.
Okay,
But it's also even communicating expectations, and that's
Absolutely.
why they need to be involved in this planning process.
Yeah, the reason I asked the question was I've had the experience in the last 2 weeks going out to some of the major casinos on the Strip, and I was in a situation where there was a lull, and I had the opportunity to speak to some of the employees, and it was remarkable to me, actually, the type of loyalty that they expressed to their employer, and it was basically because they feel that they were treated right and therefore wanted to do the job even better than that if they had not had that kind of attitude. And I know that the city employees, they feel that way, but I think they also have to know that we're looking at this. I don't think you could have one without the other, to be quite frank with you.
And that's why there's a circle. You're absolutely right. You got to have all the pieces. So we're working towards that.
Mayor, if I can, at the risk of dragging this on even longer, the one other component about this that I thought was important is notice we call these strategic business plans. And so this becomes a marriage between the operational business plan and things that are strategic, because not everything in an operational business plan is strategic. That doesn't make sense. And so, partly in answer to Councilman Brown's question, while we will identify all the service deliverables and the programs and measurements for those, they're not all strategic. And so when we have situations like this budget, where maybe we have to look at things a little tighter, you start to look at where are your strategic issues, and the things that perhaps are a little less strategic are the ones that are going to pop up. So there's another way of of identifying, Councilman Brown's question about identifying programs and perhaps why are we in those business, they will fall out when you start taking, here's the operations of what we do, here's what is strategic for us, and when you have times like this, when they're tight, you start to make decisions based upon what's strategic, and the things that aren't will fall out or get diminished.
Do you know whether any of the other governmental entities in the valley here are using a similar process?
Not to my knowledge. I know that Clark County has rolled out a performance measurement website. To the best of my knowledge, we're one of the few using Managing for Results as a process. There's a bunch of different products out there, Balanced Scorecard, a variety of others. This one we felt worked for us. We were ready. We have done enough work over the last 4 or 5 years to lay a strong foundation to be ready to make this jump. And it is a huge jump in accountability, information management, and leadership. And I applaud the 6 departments that stepped up and raised their hands and said, we're willing to go first, because we're kind of cutting our teeth on them.
Right in the middle of budget and legislative session.
Yeah,
Imagine
Mark
that.
reminds me every night with an email, you're killing me here. But I appreciate your time and attention here this morning. I do think it's relevant to our budget discussions, because this is how we're trying to be ready for these kinds of things. And I only wish we could have gotten it done faster, but we're getting there, and we appreciate your support in that effort.
All right, Councilman Wilson.
Mayor Goodman, thank you. I made some notes between the introductory remarks by Mr. Houchins and what you've said, Betsy and Mark. I'd like to just ask a couple of questions. Are we also looking, as part of this MFR program, on the overlapping services, if any, between our city and Clark County? I don't think we're going to have much overlapping with the other municipalities, but between the city and the county, it seems to me that there's probably some overlapping services that, as part of this review, would be appropriate.
Absolutely. And I think the thing is that by having a catalog of all we do, we're going to see a lot of things. You're going to see departments thinking they're doing the same things, and how many resources are being allocated to do those same things, and how we can best, address those overlaps internally. But I think it will also highlight some of the things that we're doing that may make us scratch our head in the corporate review process. It kind of will help us, I think, formulate some discussions at a higher level, like Open Schools, Open Doors, which many of you have had lengthy discussions with me and Dr. Selby and Mark and Dr. Jackson and everybody else about how do we get our hands around what we're doing for the school district versus what we get in return. How do we get our hands around that? This program, we anticipate, will help us address those kinds of issues, but also maybe ask for the right things from Clark County Social Services. All the things that we do on employment and training and homelessness and all these other things. Are we striking the right balance between what are we doing things they should be doing and we should be doing different things? Or, so I think there's going to be quite a bit of discussion as a result of these lines of businesses being identified within the departments and really sorting out what that means.
I'm glad to see that, because I have to imagine there's a lot of overlapping services, and there's probably room to make some adjustments so that we're not providing dual services when dual services aren't required. Secondly, I think in my briefing yesterday I was told that we have no control over 89%. I think that was the figure used.
91.
What was it?
91.
91%. That's set by the legislature.
I actually have a slide that I'm going to share with you in my presentation. We'll spend some time talking about that.
Okay,
But,
then maybe I'll hold my comments, but real briefly, that leaves 9% that we do have some control, and perhaps we should be looking at those entities and those programs for possible revenue sources. Innovative thinking, Mr. Houchins, I think you used the phrase innovative thinking, and one of the things that this council, at least I know Councilman Ross and myself especially, grapple with is some of our code enforcement issues on the nuisance properties and how much effort our department goes through, and righteously so, in the sense that we've got good people out there that are making the property visits and the letters and all these man hours to document these nuisance properties, and then we come before the council and we're asked to levy or lien the property for a couple thousand here, a couple thousand there, and we have a new program in the last year where we're imposing higher fines, but, you know, it's a piece of paper. That's all it is. To lien against a property of, and I don't know what the record was, I think one of them was 25,000 plus, and then last council meeting, we got another large figure, but it's only a piece of paper. So I'd ask, as part of this approach, if you will, is let's be innovative. Let's think outside the box as to ways to recoup these costs. You know, should we spend 100 man-hours when we only ask for, you know, $2,000 or $3,000, and then when are we going to get that money? Can we file suit against this property? Can we try and go after this money rather than wait until the homeowner sells the property who knows when, and then we have to bargain with them and try and get our money? So I like the thought of innovative thinking, but let's get proactive in some of these things.
A couple of sessions ago, Councilman, we were able to get a change in the legislature that does allow us to not only lien, but then the county will add that to the tax roll. And so, again, though, if you've got abandoned property, they're probably not paying their tax. There still takes time to collect that money, and so there may be other ways to do that that would cause collection to happen quicker.
And then my final point is, Councilman Brown, I think, used the term role of government, and I think we do, as part of this process, need to continuously examine the role of government. In this respect, I know our city provides some free services and some fee services, and perhaps as part of this process, an overall re-examination. Should some programs that are now free require a fee? And I'm not saying they should, I don't know, but an examination, a thorough review of the role of government and what we provide for free versus a cost should, in my opinion, be part of this examination.
Okay.
Councilor Ross.
Thank you, Your Honor. Betsy, you mentioned earlier that had we initiated this Performance Plus management a year ago, perhaps even 2 years ago, would we still be having this discussion today?
We would still be having this discussion today for a couple of reasons. One, we don't have control over 91% of the resources that come into the city. And for a variety of reasons that Steve referenced in his opening remarks, those resources that we're highly dependent on aren't performing to the level that we expected. What this program, this effort affords us the opportunity to do is to focus our efforts on the things that are critically important and strategically important when times are tight, but it also helps us make better decisions going forward when times aren't quite so tight about where we expand and to what end. So I don't know that this would have necessarily gotten us out of this pinch, because this pinch is pretty tight. But I do think that it would have helped us have some additional information going forward about the impacts of basically a flat budget on our operations. You would know immediately what it means to response times, what it means to potentially our estimated impact of crime in parks, and a variety of other issues that I know are critically important to you. So it'd be more information, and it'd be a better way for us to focus our efforts and tell you what we can do, given the financial constraints that we're facing now.
Thank you, Your Honor. If I can just make a comment. There are currently efforts underway in Carson City that would seriously diminish our ability to continue to provide services to the residents of this city at the level that we've become accustomed to. There have been reports in the media that certain lawmakers have made comments to the fact that municipalities are flush with money. And I don't take that very well, considering the state that we're in, and I know the other municipalities as well. So I just want to make comment that that's not the case. When I first came to this office, I learned quite quickly that every taxpayer dollar gets reinvested back into this community, and that's important to know for our taxpayers and the residents of this city. We're trying to do the best we can with what we've got, and I'm very optimistic, as I've shared with both of you, that I think this is just a valley we're in, and we will soon be out of this. And I'm being very optimistic along with other business leaders. So thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. All right, anybody else at this time? Nope. All right, thank you very much, Ms. Fretwell. Mr. Vincent.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mark Vincent for the record, Finance and Business Services. I, too, am optimistic, but the reality is we have to deal with what we have right now, and so I wanted to start by doing a little review over our revenue situation, and Mr. Councilman Wolfson asked a question about what resources do we actually have any control over. This slide is a projection for fiscal year 08 general fund revenues, about $550 million. I pulled out the green shaded revenues, which constitute charges for services, fines and forfeits, and miscellaneous. Miscellaneous is primarily interest earnings. Those are the only elements of our revenues that the state does not control. In fact, the mustard yellow, that's primarily property taxes. The state has not only a constitutional cap, but a statutory cap. On top of that, 2 sessions ago, when we passed AB 49 because of the runaway inflation with the runaway values for the land, we imposed an abatement process for tax bills. So we stand today at a position where we could raise our property tax rate 17 cents, but because of the condition of the abatement process, we wouldn't generate $1 of extra revenue because it would simply be abated. We wouldn't have the ability to raise property taxes to generate revenue until such time as the abatement value got down to less than what the abatement cap is, which is 3% for residential and 8% for commercial. Similarly for the intergovernmental, which is the C tax, that is about 83% of that is sales and use tax. You have no ability to increase or impose a sales tax. It's simply a function of the economy. We also have some components in there of 2 other major components, which would be general services tax, which is the old motor vehicle services tax, as well as real property transfer tax. Those taxes, again, are set by the legislature, and we get a portion of that through this process. And finally, with respect to license and permits, that is primarily business licenses and franchise fees. Franchise fees are capped by the state of Nevada. In fact, they are under attack this session, as they have been in the previous 2 or 3 sessions, and I will talk about that in a second. License fees are capped. Any license fee that's based on a gross revenue basis cannot, the rate cannot grow faster than the consumer price index, so those are capped by legislature. So that leaves us with just about 9% of the revenues that we do have, at least the state doesn't control, which is not to say we control them all, because we certainly don't have any control over the investment community and the interest we earn on our investments, and to some extent we don't have a whole lot of control over fines and forfeitures, although we can control those rates to some extent. Councilman Ross mentioned some of the legislative issues, and just to point some of these out to you, SB 96, which is a bill that would take away all of the general services tax out of the consolidated tax formula, cut the tax rate, which is essentially a personal property tax on vehicles, cuts that rate in half, and takes half that tax and provides it to the school district so that they are kept whole. That would cost us $28 million in the year of implementation, roughly about $30 million of loss, which would be a significant, on top of the flat growth we're looking at here, we would actually be looking at reductions in force if that were to happen. SB 240.
Excuse me, Mr. Vincent.
Yes,
our lobbyists, I'm sure, are addressing this issue, correct?
Absolutely.
Do they indicate that there's any potential of success in having a bill like that passed?
I actually went up and testified on that particular bill, and there's always a chance that something happens. We think our chances are good that it won't go anywhere, but this is a bill that we've seen every year, practically every year. So we have to make a showing. We have to produce the information for the legislature to understand, and we have to fight the perception that they have that we are awash with cash, which we're not, and a perception that our revenues are growing much faster than theirs. In fact, interesting statistic, on a per capita basis, the state's general fund revenues on a per capita basis are growing faster than the 5 largest cities in Nevada. They're on a per capita basis. They have grown the last 5 years. They've grown faster than any other local city. So they're in the same boat we are, actually. And so when they come to us to look for revenue sources to either help out with their unfunded projects, we obviously get a little defensive because we have our needs as well. So we have testified and will continue to fight it, and I'm optimistic that we'll be successful. But you never know. You have something you have to watch all the time up there.
Okay. How about the other bill?
The other bill, I said SB 246. This is a bill that looks at phasing out franchise taxes over a 5-year period. The year of implementation, I think, would be 2010. That would cost us about $10 million in franchise revenue. Ultimately, in full implementation, it costs us $50 million in revenue. Over the first 5 years, we'd lose about $140 million worth of general fund revenue if that were to be implemented.
Yes.
I'm not sure that one is going to get very far, hopefully.
What was that bill number?
That was
Thank you.
SB 246. On a lesser extent, we have a SB 153, which is a bill that was introduced to reallocate some consolidated tax revenues to the North Las Vegas Library District. It is essentially, it's just an approach to make a C-tax adjustment in favor of North Las Vegas. They had introduced a bill at the last session to do this that didn't get anywhere. This particular bill would cost us about $400,000 on an annual basis.
Do we know who the proponents of these bills are?
On SB 96 is Senator Beers. SB 246 is Senator Townsend. The SB 153, I think that's one of North Las Vegas's own bills that they introduced.
154.
Did I say? I have written 150. If I said 154, I apologize. I've got it as 153.
Okay.
SB 153. And then there's a 4th bill that we haven't seen yet that we will be able to review, I think, next week, and that's a bill proposed by the telecommunications industry that probably the only thing in it that's from a financial perspective that needs to be watched is it eliminates the definition, from the definition of gross revenue, it eliminates advertising revenue, which for certain franchisees like cable franchisees, which get a lot of their revenue from advertising, that would be a significant hit to us on an annual basis as well, about maybe $500,000. So those are 4 bills that we're watching, that we've gone up and testified. Marvin Levitt, our lobbyist, has testified on, and we'll continue to watch these and fight these. But these are acts that attack that 91% of revenues that we don't have any control over. And as you could imagine, with the C-tax being so dependent upon sales and use tax, it's very elastic. It flows with the economy. I won't stay a lot of time in this slide, but we are forecasting, we're revising the 07 estimate down from what we originally had budgeted for, 8.7 to 2.2%. For this fiscal year, and we're looking at a 5% increase from 07 to 08. And this is the primary source of our problems right here in terms of the flat performance of the consolidated tax.
Mayor Goodman.
Yes.
Mark, I mean, just as a general resident of Las Vegas, I've heard for the last year or two, if you will, about how the housing market is flattened and the sales of yesteryear are not occurring today. Is there any way that when we start hearing these things a year or two ago, rather than wait until the figures are in like we are now, that we can start doing things in advance in anticipation of this C-tax revenue being lower than what we'd like?
The answer to that is yes, had we actually seen it coming. And we actually, our revenue estimates for 07, when we did the budget, we put the budget together a year ago, actually did represent about 3.5 percentage point decrease over what we had experienced prior year. So we knew it was going down. We certainly saw indications it was going down. But the bottom fell out with the start of the year. Our 4th quarter numbers for last fiscal year, which was a quarter that we wouldn't have seen until we were already 2 months into the new fiscal year of '07, that performance was about a little under 8% on the C-Tax. So 8%, I was feeling pretty comfortable with 8.7 until about September. In September, we got the July numbers from C-Tax, and it fell apart.
And so we did start to make adjustments, but then that last
No one-
quarter, you said it really dropped.
Well,
Is that what you said?
yes, that's right. I mean, if you would have told me last May that the first 6 months' performance of C-Tax for Southern Nevada was going to be worse than it was when we had in fiscal year 2002 when we had the 9/11 attack, I would have told you were crazy. But that's where we are today. The C-Tax grew in fiscal year '02 by 1.5%. And we were amazed by that, by the way. I mean, I really thought that we would be negative or flat that year, but we still grew by 1.5%, and we started seeing recovery in '03 and '04. We're at 0.4% for the first 6 months of this year. I don't know that I could have predicted that.
Is the funding of the C-Tax regionalized, or is it the entire state?
The taxes are collected by, some of the taxes are collected locally, paid to the state, and the state uses a consolidated tax distribution formula that takes the revenues that were collected in the county and then distributes it to the local agencies in the county based on a formula. And it's kind of a complicated formula, but just to remind you, there are 5 components of that. There's the sales and use tax. There's the which we know is flat. The next largest component is the general services tax, which is the old motor vehicle privilege tax, and that's growing at about it was growing at about 6% for the year. So that's pretty stable. The next largest component is the real property transfer tax. That's about the real property transfer tax is about 5% of the consolidated tax total. It's down 25%, and it's down by a fourth. And that is just driven by real estate transactions.
That would include real estate transactions up in Reno, for instance.
That is our number for Clark County.
That's why I'm asking. So
That's a Clark County only number. Let me try to explain it again. I probably didn't do a good enough job. Those revenues in those 5 categories that are collected in Clark County
Yes.
go to the state,
Right.
and then are reapportioned by the state back to the county agencies in a
Okay.
formula.
Back to Clark County, including the city of Las Vegas.
Right.
Is that the way it works? So
right.
Reno and Washoe would have their own
That's right.
economic
They-
performance.
They have their
that
own
affects their
problems.
C-Tax. Right. Okay. I got
Yes.
it.
But because of that formula, for example, we do benefit from if there are new 1 million, 2 million square foot shopping centers that are retail centers that are going up, in new casinos that generate sales tax. The whole county benefits from that on the basis of the apportionment formula that we call the C-Tax formula. So we do benefit from that. So it's pooled and then distributed.
Mayor Goodman, if you
Yes.
don't mind, just a quick question. Do we have a rainy day fund or something that we could call a rainy day fund where we set aside monies? Is it even legal? Do other governments have these
Other
funds where you can set aside money so that in the event of something like this, we have capital to draw from?
It is legal. Other entities do. The state has a rainy day fund. I believe the city of Henderson has a similar fund. We do not have a similar fund. Of course, the time to fund that kind of a fund is when you have the money to do it, not when you don't.
But
We
we've
maintain-
had some
we do-
good years, and
Well, we do have some policies that help us along that way. For example, the council has a policy that says we'll maintain a general fund balance of at least 12% of our revenues. That's helpful. Bond raters like that, and we in fact have surpassed that in all the years past. We typically are running closer to 15%, which in itself is a reserve. This year we won't be there. We're probably much closer to 12 this year and finish '08 at about 12.
I've had the sense, Councilman, that one of the reasons we don't have it It's a pretty good reason, and that is if we had a fund such as that, it would be considered to be a slush fund by the legislature, and they would punish us for our prudence.
I think it would be worth examining, though, and I use the word examining, perhaps, Betsy, in your approach to a way to set something up with very, very strict guidelines as to what we could use it for and when, and perhaps that might shield us from that kind of attack.
Mr. Mayor?
I understand, but it's,
Okay, well,
if smarter-
perception becomes reality, not reality. But
a lot of people are smarter than me that have thought about this before, and I'm certainly willing to hear what other people have to say.
Councilwoman.
I was going to say the school board did that, set a certain amount of money, and they found that the legislature did decrease what they could have because they felt they had that money in reserve. Now, they didn't cut them to totally get rid of the whole reserve, but it hurt them as they were doing lobbying and trying to get additional funds for the school district. So even though I do believe, in fact, I was one of the board members who voted for that reserve, nonetheless, we did find it came to help hurt us some.
Amazing how you can be punished for being prudent,
Right.
perhaps.
Well,
And one reason we wanted the reserve was because we were going into all these bonds with the building, and you wanted to keep your bond rating high, and that's one of the things they look at.
by the way, I didn't say this when I started that discussion about what revenues we have control over and what revenues the state controls, but we are, as we all know, the public probably doesn't recognize, we do not have home rule. We are a Dillon's rule state. We are really a creature of the state, and that's why they exercise so much control over us. And if we were a home rule state, a home rule state, and we had control over that, our revenue sources, then having a rainy day fund wouldn't be a dangerous thing. But under Dillon's rule, when we have been good about managing our funds and doing the right things, there's a history of us getting punished for doing it. And it's an amazing thing, but that's the way it is.
Your Honor?
Yes, Councilman
And-
Brown.
Over the last 4 or 5 years, though, Mark, give yourself and the department's credit that not only the general fund reserve, we have been very conservative, which helps bond rating, but our property tax adopted policy as far as that cushion. At one point, we were the lowest assessment for years until they passed AB 489, which punished us for
That's
being prudent.
Right.
And some of the other budget policies that the council has adopted on those good years, in lieu of a rainy day fund, we have used those excess funds in the general budgeting process and the augmentation for one-time expenses. We have not hired things that would cost ongoing, have an ongoing impact. So it's, you and the city and the council has adopted some policies over the last 5 or 6 years that have taken advantage of the good years to do things that perhaps this year we're not going to be able to do. So, there's a big picture in that. The question as far as the rainy day fund is a good one, but we have a kind of a pseudo rainy day fund in our conservative approach to some of these budgeting items.
Then we always have the option of terminating projects that perhaps haven't been started and reapportioning those capital dollars to other one-time needs. But a rainy day fund and one-time money is never going to help you from an operating standpoint because that money just can't be used and depended upon for ongoing operations.
Your Honor.
Yes, Councilman Rowe.
Mr. Vincent, as Councilman Wilson mentioned thinking outside the box, what drastic, bold measures would it take to become home rule, self-governing?
I'm probably the wrong person to ask. I know that there is some interest in giving us a little more autonomy over certain things, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure in my lifetime here, or my tenure here at the city, I'll ever see it.
Well, and I'll ask you, with the city manager's office listening, are there any other cities in this state that are home rule, that are self-governing?
In this state, no.
There's a unique situation in Boulder City. Boulder City had a federal charter, and they have a lot more authority than most other cities throughout the state. There was also a consolidation of Ormsby County and Carson City, So they have some blended responsibilities and some blended authorities that we do not enjoy here. So there are examples in the state, but generally the answer is no, and Brad may want to comment as well.
I don't have anything that's accurate.
Your Honor, if I can continue. I would think philosophicically, if the state controls the destiny of municipalities, cities, and counties, that it would be gung-ho to support and continue to help the efforts of growing metropolises such as Las Vegas in its efforts to continue to provide wonderful services to the people who live here. And I'm missing that mark. I mean, here we have lawmakers in Carson City trying to punish cities for their efforts to continue to grow and to continue to provide great services. So I'm missing something here.
Well, I think it's important that we always keep in mind that you know, the biggest impact government has is local. I mean, this is our local government is where the citizens get the bulk of their services, where they get the bulk of the benefit. And we just have to keep reminding people, and that's part of the job, that's part of the reason why we have lobbyists up there. We have to keep reminding everybody that we provide needed, necessary services, and that this is where the rubber hits the road for most of the constituents. And that's part of the job of reminding folks. And part of the reason why we're talking about this today is hopefully we have citizens in our audience and certainly viewers that may not be aware of some of these things. So this dialogue is helpful to educate people that says, you know, oh, I didn't know that you didn't have any control to raise taxes, and I didn't realize that in a downturn like this that the city just can't run out and raise property taxes or sales taxes or any other tax. And we don't have that control. I'm not saying that would be a good idea to do that in a downturn, but I'm saying the reality is you don't have control over it. You're pretty much driven by economic forces as the rules are established by the legislature, and that's the way it is right now.
I assume that the unincorporated area of the county is also under Dillon's rule.
Yes. Yes, and by the way, I didn't say this earlier. One of you may have mentioned it, I thought I may have heard it, but this situation is not unique this problem is not unique to Las Vegas. All the other Clark County cities, in fact, two of them have negative C-tax growth. I mean, it's not even flat, they have negative. One has negative growth by almost 3% for the first 6 months. Unfortunately for them, on the property on the development side, they're growing a little faster on the property development side, so their property taxes are helping them out a little bit more. But nonetheless, it's a tight year for everybody down south, because this is a major revenue source for all of us, including Clark County. I mentioned property tax revenue. That's the only bright spot in our revenue situation. We're close to 10%. We're going to budget for 10%. This slide is one that I updated for fiscal year 08. It shows our revenue from property tax. I believe this excludes the fire safe. This is just our general fund operating tax rate. And just some information, the last 3 years, the mustard yellow bar on top of the dark green bar represents the amount of the tax bill that property owners received that was abated. If you recall seeing your tax bill, in one column it says, on the left column it says, here's what your tax bill is on your assessed value, and then there's a middle column called an abatement, and then there's a final column which is your final bill. That middle column that you'd see in your tax bill is that mustard yellow portion of this column, and as you can see, in 06 and 07 we had some substantial growth in assessed value that would have generated taxes that were abated. That yellow bar would be almost 18 million in 06, 47 million in 07, and then in 09 it's about 52 million. The last 3 years without AB 49, property tax revenues would have grown by 24% had the council not taken action to drop their property tax rate, which is exactly what we would have done. But with AB 49, the taxes have grown about 9.8% over those 3 years, so that's the only bright spot. But again, as we start talking about what's happening with residential construction, a lot of this, I think, is that we're seeing, at least in 08, is more commercial than residential in 07 to 08. This is a slide that Councilman Brown talked about a little bit earlier. The red bar represents the statutory limit on our operating rate. Prior to AB 49, the state controlled our operating rate by having a calculation that set the statutory limit. And you can see in fiscal year 96 and 97, the council's policy at that time was to levy the tax rate right to the max of the statutory limit. In fiscal year 98, we dropped the tax rate by about 9% and had a slight increase in fiscal year 2000, and we've maintained a flat tax rate for operating since 2000, despite the fact that the operating levy cap has grown and now represents about 17 cents more than what we actually levy. And as Councilman Brown pointed out earlier, when AB 49 hit in 2006, essentially that cushion went away. As long as there is an abatement portion on the tax bill, you don't have any ability to raise your operating tax rate up to that cap. You can raise it, but it affects nothing. It just doesn't generate any tax revenue because it gets abated. I do not have 08 numbers again, but this slide just a reminder that blue pie is the City of Las Vegas operating rate plus the debt rate plus the fire safety initiative. We're less than a quarter of the tax rate. The state legislators often remark that the state doesn't really get much of the property tax. They only get 18.5 cents of the property tax, but I remind you every year that green pie, which is the $1.30 that goes to the school district, 75 cents of that goes to the school district operating budget, which is a direct subsidy to the state's contribution to the school districts based on their per pupil funding. So the state benefits directly from 75 cents of that $1.30. The other 55 cents goes towards debt service for the school expansion program, which again, the school district is the responsibility of the state. Other revenues, license revenues, we're expecting to grow at about 3%. Franchise fees should grow with population. We don't see any projected rate increases at this time. But again, franchise fees, as I indicated, there's 2 bills at the legislature that are looking at franchise fees. And charges for services and fines and forfeits should go with population. This is a table that just recaps what we've been talking about. You'll see that on the intergovernmental, which is the consolidated tax line, you can see the reduction from 292 on our original budget to 274 million on the revised budget, and forecasting 286 for 08. The only other item of note there in charges for services, the $3 million, this is showing $2 million, but it's about a $3 million reduction in bed rentals from the loss of the federal rental program.
Mayor Goodman?
Yes.
Mark, could you go back to that slide? Under fine and forfeits, we have an increase in the revenue. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. What comes under that category?
These are primarily court-related, municipal court-related revenues. Municipal court is not in an enterprise fund. They are a general fund activity, and this represents the revenue primarily that is being generated by the municipal court, either through fines or bail forfeitures and things of that nature.
A bail forfeiture is another way of having a defendant in a criminal case pay money into the system. As I understand it, a fine is just that. It's a fine based upon a conviction, but sometimes through plea bargaining, if you have a defendant who's on informal probation and they have to stay out of trouble and do some counseling, another way of raising revenue and punishing a defendant is to call it a bail forfeiture.
I can give you a little more detail. Of that 17 million, only 400,000 is forfeited bail. The other $16.7 million for in 08 is from court fines.
Okay, so certainly 95% or whatever is fines.
Court fines.
Now, is that the actual fine, or is it the administrative assessment that is attached to the fine?
It's what was actually collected by the court for fines.
Do we have to share any of that money with anybody else?
I'm not, off the top of my head, I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
I think that if there are fines that we collect similar, I think I probably can answer the question. If there are fines that we collect that we have to share, they're not in that $17 million number. They would be outside of it. Similar to, for example, our building and safety function collects fees for the state, like the Old Tortoise Fund, for example. They collect that as part of their fees, but it doesn't flow through them. They immediately remit that to the county.
I see Mr. Carmody's here. Is this an avenue for us to pursue in our innovative thinking of raising revenue? Is this part of the 9% we have control over, Mark?
To some extent, yes.
Okay. I mean, is this something that we could explore as far as having the persons that are committing crimes and breaking laws pay even more to help support our budget?
Councilman Jim Carmody, Administrator of Municipal Court. There are administrative assessments that we do charge that are set by the state. Those assessments go to the state. One of the issues that we need to pay attention to rather carefully is if the state decides to raise assessments, and they have over the last 2 sessions, the amount that the defendant is required to pay increases substantially, but the money does not flow to the city, it flows to the state. So that does put some limitation on what we might be looking at in terms of fine increases. We do have a construction assessment that we do get the money for that, for the payment on the RJC. And there is a specialty court assessment now that goes to the state, and we get a portion of that, a very small portion compared to what we collect. I think we're the second largest contributor to that fund in the state, and we get a very small percent at the city for specialty courts. We are looking at ways, in fact, there is as part of our budget, a discussion of potential traffic master. We know that that will enhance traffic fine revenue. Probably the cost for that will be about half of what the revenue would generate. And we don't yet have permission from the legislature to implement the traffic master because that's still being decided. And if we did, we probably wouldn't be able to do that until sometime early in '08 calendar year. But we do believe that would be a help.
Thank you. Is that something that we're going to talk about in the future during this workshop?
I actually do have a slide, Councilman, on that as a potential, recognizing, of course, that the bill
Sure.
hasn't been addressed yet by the legislature, so it's contingent upon that.
We're going to come to it, though, at a later part of your
I do have a slide just as a.
Okay.
I have a few slides at the end to talk about some of the potential things that we could do that will help us get through the next year.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilman.
when you're done, that's
Go ahead, please.
I had a call last week from the man owning Larry's Meat Market in Ward 1. He was very upset because different entities within the city have been increasing their fees, the types of fees we're talking about now. For example, the weights and measures, and he told me how much it had gone up each year. And now he said where they didn't have an inspection fee or where it was small, they raised it higher. And when they talked with one of the individuals doing that, they said it was because they weren't getting additional tax monies, and this was their way to raise money for the firemen or for whomever it was. And he asked me about it, and I could not recall that we voted on increasing a fee for that type of thing. Do we have entities within the city that do that and take the money to help their budget? And then would that interfere with what we're trying to do, what Councilman Wolfson is saying, looking for additional revenues?
A couple answers to that. First of all, we don't raise any fees without bringing them to the full council.
Oh, I believe that, right.
So the weights and measures is a fee that I don't think is a city fee. So I'm struggling with identifying that.
Well, he was just angry,
But-
I think. But how about the inspection fee? That was the thing that tipped him off.
Well, I assume that was a health department inspection fee is what I'm guessing.
Fire department, he said. Maybe it was
The
him.
inspection fees for the fire department, I believe that last year we did have a fee increase for we had 2 years ago? 2 years ago, we had a fee increase for fire inspections
Nice.
that went through here. The other part of your question, when we're talking about the general fund money is just that, general fund money. It is for general purposes defined by the city council. we don't, in the general fund process, we don't allow departments to think in terms of the fees that they generate as proprietary to that department. However, having said that, there are times when we argue that if we add this function or service with this related fees, that they may pay for themselves and support that. We had a situation that, for example, with the proactive rental program that we didn't actually implement, but the concept of that was we wanted to make sure that apartments were safe and habitable for our citizens, and if we did a proactive inspection of those and charge a fee, the fee could pay for the cost of implementing that program. So we do look at programs in that fashion, that if we're going to add a new program, as a way for that new program should pay for itself based upon who's benefiting from that.
So no departments do this on their own. It all comes through us.
Yes.
And so it might be it's coming through us, but it might be that they've been told it would be for their department, or it helps meet their needs. Okay. I might come and ask you more specifically about that so I can return his call. Thank you.
Thank you.
Talking about the 07 budget, because of the situation we're faced with the reduction of revenues, typically we do, on a normal basis, we do not we do not hit our budget targets every year for the simple reason, one of the biggest reasons is that we fund all positions whether they're filled or not. Now, over the course of the year, all positions aren't filled. There's a vacancy process, and our turnover ratio might be low, but at any given point in time, we might have about 5% of our positions that are vacant. That generates itself a savings. That's one of the things that we use that allows a little bit of a cushion for revenue performance for the year. It also, if the revenue performs well, that cushion then allows for a one-time transfer into capital projects or for other projects of needed money for projects that don't have a dedicated revenue source. So we go through that process. This year, because it's clear we're not going to hit our revenue targets, we're going to miss them by at least $17 million, that it's important for us to have a reduction in a formal reduction in our FY07 budget this year to make sure that the departments recognize that there is a limit now that they cannot spend over. We have to drop the bar, if you will. I can tell you that through January, looking at the numbers for the general fund through January, we have about a $21 million underrun through January, so I'm not uncomfortable that we can achieve this reduction. But what that means is that we will be a little more careful at reviewing requests to fill vacant positions. It's not a hiring freeze. It's not that we're not going to fill positions, but we may look at them a little more carefully. We may delay filling some that are maybe less critical. Certainly public safety positions are going to have a high priority in terms of filling those. So one of the things that we're looking to do is actually make a formal reduction in our FY07 budget in response to the poor revenue performance with the consolidated tax. And this is about what it would look like. In terms of the 08 budget, every year we ask for the departments to request expanded requests. We do not automatically increase anybody's budget except for what we consider to be the contractual increases in labor and benefits, the existing funded positions. We had 140 positions that were requested. We had some overtime requests. Of that $5.3 million, about four of that was for the fire department alone. There's some non-labor requests, grand total of $27.9 million. In this budget for 08, we're not, for the tentative budget, and I think I don't remember if I explained this or not. Right now we're working towards the tentative budget, which has to be filed on the state, I think on April 16th, because the 15th is on a Sunday. That's a tentative budget, and then we're going to come back to council at least once more in our final budget hearing in May to finalize our budget. And so one of the things we're looking for at the end here is some guidance about things you might want to see us look at between now and the final that we can tweak and adjust. But as we stand on the tentative budget, we're not meeting any of these additional
Would it be a fair statement that when we evaluate overtime costs, that we make a comparison as to what the benefits would be to have a full-time employee versus having an existing employee working overtime?
Yes. And that's one of the things that we're going to recommend to you that we'll be doing. We have met with the fire department specifically, and we think we have an approach that will give us an answer to that trade-off again. If the mix is right, that we can add so many new firemen and the savings and the overtime equals that, and it's a zero-sum game, it makes sense to do that. And we'll be looking at that between now and the final budget as well. In terms of the requests that we are funding, the first two represent what we have calculated as the contractual increases based upon our collective bargaining agreements. I will tell you that probably 90% of our workforce falls under a collective bargaining agreement, and we have scheduled increases for those, and this represents what those would be. The last two represent the Metro operating requests, and if there's a bright spot in the budget, it is the fact that the More Cops initiative for the quarter-cent sales tax is going to allow the Metropolitan Police Department to put about 450 new officers on the street. Our share of those officers, if you will, based upon the apportionment calculations, about 170 officers. As a result of that, the operational impact to us, because remember we just approved the apportionment plan and it went down a little bit, so our operational increase for the Metro request is only $400,000. So that's the good news on that regard. And of course, they're still adding those 450 officers to the street with the More Cops. In addition to that, Metro had some capital equipment requests, capital facility requests that I pulled out of the operating budget that we would deal with separately. These are projects that likely the county will initiate, and will reimburse the county for our 38% of those projects. And we'll be funding those requests, and I'll give you a little detail for that. In terms of the general fund expenditures, I want to spend a little bit of time on this. Well, again, when people look at our budget, oftentimes they get a little confused and they see that the yellow pie and the red pie, which represents salaries and benefits, if you look at that, that's only about 56% of the budget, and they make an assumption that our budget isn't very labor intensive. There's a lot of other stuff in there. The problem with that assumption is the Metro contribution. Our Metro contribution looks like a special contribution, and in fact it is, but you have to remember about 81% of the $130 million is Metro labor. So in fact, when you take that in consideration, that our share of the Metro labor force, about 75% of our budget is labor. And so when you have contractual increases that have to be honored, that's the driver. That's the driver that those have to be met, and that's the first come. When you have a revenue growth that's down around 4 or 5%, the first slice of that growth in revenue is going to go to these contractual increases. And that's
pursuant to our performance management. Do we do any analysis as to whether we're getting a bang for our buck from Metro?
We already have. Betsy, you want to answer that? We do get some information statistical information from Metro, but they're not part of our performance.
No, they have been very active in our strategic planning effort. I have not talked with them about participating in Performance Plus. We can certainly talk with them about that if that's the council's desire. They do provide us regular monthly reports. They provide regular monthly reports to each council ward regarding various kinds of activity, police activity in the ward. So there's a lot of information that's shared with us, but generally we leave that to the sheriff to evaluate the effectiveness of his programs, and periodically, if there's something that comes up, we address it individually related to the concern that's arisen or a new program that's being considered.
But you would think, because we pay so much of their budget, that they should be part of this process. I think you should discuss it with them to see whether or not they would voluntarily become part of it, because it's a good process. They could only benefit from it, and it gives us more of a methodology for accountability.
I'll be happy to discuss it with the sheriff.
Mayor Goodman.
Yes.
I guess it would depend on what our definition of a bang for a buck is. We're supplying Metro with a lot of money, obviously, for good public safety purposes, but what are we getting out of it? And I think I agree with you. I think it would be healthy to invite them. Now, they're technically not one of our departments, if you will, but maybe on a voluntary basis, because as we add 450 more police officers next year out in the streets, what is that going to produce? And you know, this is a whole different discussion, if you will, and it opens up a lot of things. But I think for purposes of budget discussions, it's healthy to think about.
I'd be happy to explore that, Mayor, and also just so you know, we've created a criminal justice committee. That's an internal committee that we work with the sheriff, and Brad actually is kind of spearheading it from the city attorney's office, municipal courts involved. That may be a really good opportunity to focus the effort so that we're seeing the impact on the priorities that you've set for us in our public safety priority area as well.
Because I think the ramifications of having 400 more police officers on the street, that hasn't been felt by us yet. That means beds, it means more jail personnel, it means busier courtrooms, it means more city attorneys, it means more public defenders. This could have a real effect on us, depending on where their influence is going to lie as far as enforcement. So I think we're entitled to that discussion.
One comment I wanted to make on the transfer out, the light green pie, that's $26.3 million. About half of that is for debt service, and the other half is a transfer into our capital programs for some of the commitments that we have with the fire stations and the Metro capital requests, which I'll talk about here in a second. When we look at the expense summary, we had budgeted for $553 million. We need to drop that to $533 million in order to be able to execute the FY08 budget of $551 million. So you can see that the FY08 budget is actually going to be a couple $1 million less than what we thought we had budgeted for 07. A couple other slides I want to go through quickly. This is one we've been looking at, which is a staff per capita. The green bar is the public safety component on a per capita basis, which includes Metro, and the green bar is is everything else, all the non-public safety. And I don't have the 08 numbers, but I would imagine when I come back in May with the budget hearing, we add the Metro's more cops onto that green bar, it'll start ticking back up. I think I mentioned that with the Metro's More Cops initiative that they've achieved their two officers per thousand, which is one of their goals that they wanted to get with the quarter-cent tax. So again, this is just saying that when I have the 08 bar here for Metro and us, that we're going to see that the red bar is going to drop a little bit more because the population is growing, but we're not adding any new staff. So math is going to tell you it's going to be less than 3.13. Whereas we were at 3.5 non-public safety back in 2001. Vacant positions, we talked a little bit about this. In 01 and 02, we were running close to 8% vacancy, and that was primarily because, again, the 9/11 we instituted in fiscal year 2001, we started the Position Justification Control Committee as a result of what we saw in an upcoming recession, and all of a sudden 9/11 hit. The spike in 2005, I believe, is being driven by the early out program, where in order to pay for the early out, we had the positions were remaining vacant for 6 months, so we had a higher than normal. We're tracking a little over 5% vacancy right now. As Mr. Houchins mentioned, we still have over 100 projects that are in process. These are, by the way, these do not include road and flood. Road and flood's a whole separately funded program, and I didn't include those numbers in here, so that program continues to go on. Although I will say that although we haven't seen a bill, we did have some testimony up to the legislature. There are some people think that, again, that the South is awash with money, and if we can just divert revenues from Clark County's road and flood programs or other programs, we can fund the $3.8 or $4 billion shortfall the state highway system has. And so I just throw that out there. I don't think that's going to happen, but it's something we're watching that we need to continue to watch. We are planning on funding almost $23 million in capital projects. There's 2 fire projects and 4 metro projects, which I'll show you in a second. Additionally, we haven't had an opportunity to get with each of you, each of the council members, exclusive of the mayor. You do have residential construction tax revenues in your wards that need to be programmed. And so even though we're not adding any new capital projects, there may be some smaller projects that you may want to spend that money on, and we need to get with you to finalize that between now and the final budget. So we haven't forgotten you. By the way, I don't know if Steve mentioned, but a couple things, we're always, I'm always learning and always amazed at my shortcomings, things I don't do, and I don't mean my height, by the way. My shortcomings that I don't get accomplished that come to me, and I thought, why the hell didn't I think of that earlier? So it's just an admission on my part, but we have been identifying, since I've been here, the operating and maintenance costs associated with capital projects. So when we put together a capital project list, we tell you what staff believes is going to be the cost for the operations, maintenance, and programming of those projects. That $339 million worth of projects is tagged with an $11.1 million increase in operational costs. So when that $339 million finally comes online, much like some of the projects we're going to talk about here in a second, there is an associated cost with the city operating and maintaining those. Don't want to lose sight of that. The shortcoming issue that occurred to me, I think it was in a briefing with, I can't remember who it was. I think it might have been with Councilman Reese. A question was asked that why don't we project what the revenue sources are going to be, or their availability for when those projects come online? That's one thing we haven't done. Oftentimes, again, we identify the project, we fund the project, we tell you that it's going to cost X hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars to run and operate, but we don't tell you what our projection is of our ability to fund that increase 2 years down the road when that project comes online. When times are good and things growing, we're sort of betting on the come it's going to be there. So I think that's a shortfall that we probably need to begin to discuss, that it's not enough just to identify what it's going to cost to operate and maintain. We need to start thinking in terms of projecting, are we going to be able to, given a revenue projection, are we going to be able to support that? And so that's something that we haven't done very well. We need to do a better job with that.
Mayor Goodman? I mean, unless I'm missing something here, Mark, you're talking about a crystal ball? I mean,
Yes.
Do you have a crystal ball? I don't have a crystal ball.
Well, one thing we have done, I mean, it's a valid question, but we still need to pay some attention to this. When starting this year with this year's process, Finance has been working very closely with Charlie Hukowski in Public Works, and Charlie's goal was you should be running your capital program like the road and flood. And I said, well, wait a second, that's easy. The road and flood has a defined revenue source. They can predict that very well, and it's dedicated, and so it's easier. But he kept making the point, but still the point is, you have history. You can go back in history, and you can, using history, try to project or predict what might happen on average over the next 5 years. And we did that. And when City Manager Doug Selby and I briefed all of you a few months ago with a proposed 5-year capital plan that was very aggressive, that looked at issuing quite a bit of debt. And the idea with that plan was, if we could count on the revenues that we have seen the last 5 years, if that was average, if we could project that forward, then this is what we could support. This year's a blip. 07, 08 is a blip. It's a blip in the wrong direction. And so we're forestalling all that. We have to push that out. That process of doing it, revenue review in relation to how much that one-time revenue or debt service can support new projects, not any different than also projecting what those operating costs are going to be, and do we think, given normal operational revenue growth, will we have the revenue to sustain those in the future? And I think it's a valid question. I think we should be doing that. And it won't be perfect, and but it's part of planning, and that's something I think we're deficient in, and I think it's something we need to look at.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Councilwoman.
are you talking about projects such as we have a Fire Station 6 in Ward 1, where partial monies were given to rebuild this fire station, and there's not any money designated to finish it? Or, as I read about in Councilman Ross's ward, that it was in the newspaper that there's the fire station, but not the money to staff it. And there was some other, is this what you're talking about or something else?
I'm talking about the latter example, not the former. So I'm not talking about Fire Station 6, but I'm talking about things like Centennial Hills rolling on and becoming operational in say, July of this summer. We're going to have to staff that. We knew what that staffing was going to cost, and we thought that revenue was going to be there, and here I am today telling you that we don't have the revenue. So that's what I'm talking about. More the operational impact of staffing, running, paying utilities for a new facility or park than I am talking about finding the capital money to complete it. And Station 6 is an example of something I'm not as concerned about, because Station 6 already exists and has full complement of staffing and equipment. We're just trying to build a new facility and relocate them. So finding the money to complete that is not going to produce an operational impact.
I assume when we create debt, we're anticipating more than one blip, so we don't get ourselves into a situation like some other cities who become insolvent, actually, as a result of not being able to meet their obligations.
Yes, and that all comes into the crystal ball that Councilman Wilson talked about. We need to be careful with our estimates, that they're sound, and I believe they should be conservative. If we get too aggressive, we're going to overextend and have a problem. But we're talking about the same.
Right,
same
but I
thing.
trust that the manager and our staff will advise us when we're in those murky waters.
If they don't, I will.
Okay. All right, we're not there, correct? Okay.
Other than, as I said, we are looking at extending out. We're not adding any new capital projects for next year, so we are pushing our program out a year because we can't afford to incur any new debt, or we don't have any revenue to fund any new projects for next year. And again, we're all like Councilman Ross, very optimistic that this will turn around.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Then what happens to, say, a firehouse or a community center, which I know the firehouse was before I was on the council, that the money's being designated to get started, and it's not on the list of capital projects? What happens to that? I mean, it seems to me it might get lost.
They don't get lost. It just gets pushed out. You have to shift everything out a year, so we don't lose it. It doesn't come off the list. It doesn't come off an identified need, but it has to get pushed.
But if it's not on this list, then what list is it on?
It's on the 5-year CIP list.
5-year. Okay.
Yeah, we have a 5-year capital plan, and by state budget law, we're only looking at fiscal year 08. We're only looking at what we're going to fund in 08, but there is a plan for fiscal years 9, 10, 11, and 12, and that plan is based upon a revenue prediction as compared to what our needs are, and so we've done that.
As to fire and rescue, have we exhausted the fire bond money?
We have, as a reminder, the Fire Safety Initiative, which was a 9.5-cent property tax, was passed in 2000. It was implemented in fiscal year 01 or 02, I forget. Would have been in fiscal year 01. By ballot question, 80% of that was going to operational staff. At least 20% was going to capital related to the stations themselves, or the trucks and the pumpers and the rescues. And we have achieved that. So we make sure that we set aside at least 20% to go for that. The growth in property tax has not kept pace with the growth in the cost of operating those fire stations, nor with the inflated cost of the construction of those fire stations. So for all intents and purposes, it's pretty much exhausted. We are using the 20% portion of the Fire Safety Initiative to help us fund the replacement of certain apparatus that's meeting its retirement age. So
When do we consider going out for another bond?
another another bond or another ballot question?
Ballot question?
Mark, maybe I could jump in real quick. Mayor, one of the things that we briefed the mayor and council on was the fact that we're trying to impanel a citizens committee right now to really look at the long-term financial feasibility of our fire and rescue services. That would be a place in which we would have those kinds of discussions. There's also a lot of other things that are in play that might impact whether a bond is the right thing. As you know, our bond barely passed in 2000. And it would be an enormous effort to try and put together an advocacy process, and that has to be citizen-led. We can't do it for ourselves. So that's one of the things that we're hoping this advisory panel will help us evaluate, discuss if it's a reasonable option, if it gets us where we need to be. And we're hoping to bring those recommendations back to the council this summer.
Okay, good. Thank you.
With respect to what we are recommending, the sources we have for capital, remember that we announced back in December that we had a $17 million excess fund balance over our budgeted fund balance that could be used for one-time money. Over the course of the last 8 months, Council has approved actions that has consumed on projects and things of that nature, not on operational items, about $6 million of that. That leaves $11 million left for augmentation. We also have a one-time payroll savings, which is as simple as I can describe it to you, is in fiscal year 2007, we had 27 pay periods that we costed, and in 2008 we go back to the normal 26. So there's an extra pay period, an extra labor distribution cost. This happens once every 14 years, so it happened to happen last year. So that's a savings of one-shot money. And then we had planned on transferring out in 2007 about $1.1 million for our share of the Metro hangar in terms of a progress payment with the county. So that's $22.9 million. And this is what we're proposing to allocate that money on, at least on the tentative budget. Fire Station 48 has, I think, about $3 million already on it. We need an additional $7.2 million to finish that fire station. I believe the Engine 48 is funded. I think we're looking at Rescue 48, and I'll be talking about that in a second. Fire Station 6, Councilwoman Tarkanian mentioned that we needed some additional funding to construct now on a new site. That's what that item's for. And then the next 4 items are capital items that the Metropolitan Police Department is asking for. These are our share of these items. The Metro hangar for their air rescue and helicopters, a new area command, 2 new area commands, and the Metrocom expansion. By the way, there is a interlocal agreement that I didn't get on this next agenda. It's an interlocal agreement with the county that will establish what our criteria is for how we would go about dealing with future Metro substations and how those would be, depending whether funded as pay-as-you-go or funded by debt, what the agreement is and how we're going to fund that. In the past, we've done it on a case-by-case basis. George Stevens and I have kind of agreed that we should probably have a master agreement, and underneath that master agreement, then we'd execute for individual things. So that's the use of the $22.9 million. I mentioned residential construction tax that we still have to get with each of the wards to talk about what projects you have that you would want to use this money for, and it does have to be used for neighborhood parks. And then it leaves us with some of the decision points or issue points that I wanted to close out with. Obviously, for the remainder of fiscal year 07 and fiscal year 8, our expectations need to change a little bit. If we're going to have more residents moving in, more needs with the same amount of staff, response times are going to be longer in many cases. Quality may suffer. We may have an inability to support special programs or events. Being able to pull resources from certain departments to be able to support things like the Las Vegas Grand Prix or the Tennis Channel in the future, at least for the next 18 months, is going to be very difficult for staff to do. And overtime needs to be controlled within budget levels, and I think we were talking about that a little bit. I mentioned position reviews. We currently have 170 vacant positions. 54 of those are over 6 months old. We are reviewing those positions. The 54 that are vacant over 6 months annualized to about $4.6 million. This is always an opportunity for us to look at it. Now, I will tell you that many of these positions are being actively recruited, have actually been approved by the PJC, in some cases a couple times. Some of these positions are just difficult to fill. But nonetheless, the city manager and the departments and myself are looking at these positions to see, are they really needed? And given the situation we have, should we not fill this vacant position in favor of adding something else, a different kind of position? So that's going on. And I expect when we come back in May that we'll have some recommendations specifically about which positions that we're suggesting should be eliminated in favor of some other kind of a position. And again, these are vacant positions. We mentioned a couple of ideas. We mentioned the traffic commissioner that requires a charter change. Half-year implementation might generate, conservatively would generate maybe $550,000 of extra revenue in '08. And the staffing cost of that is about $350,000. So if the legislature does act on the proposed charter change, this is an area that we might want to look at. And I would expect that the municipal court will come back, if it does happen, that will come back later in fiscal year '08 with a proposal and a plan.
I thought during our briefing yesterday you said it was going to be a wash as far as the financial implications if we had a traffic commissioner. This would appear that we'll be making a profit.
That's the numbers that I received from the municipal court, and I think they're fairly conservative, yes. I don't know.
Which is it?
I think
wash or profit? Mr. Carmody? It's not a hard question.
No, Mr. Mayor, our review says that this will be a very conservative profit estimate. Actually, looking at the data, we looked at about $2.7 million for the year. We cut that in half, and then I told them to take another 15% off for potential collection problems. So the revenue for a half year, $550,000, is about as conservative, I think, as you would want me to be. It is very conservative. The cost side is very liberal. 3 of those positions we don't think will stay beyond 6 months once we implement a new case management system. And I have added into it costs for the city attorney as well as a clerk in those numbers. So I've tried to put all the costs that I could anticipate into that number, and that excess will be, I'm pretty confident that's going to be there.
Can you give us a very quick explanation as to why we need this, rather than to have the existing judges handle the traffic? Is it a matter that the existing judges don't like traffic?
No.
Okay.
No, not at all. It is not. The thought was, you all know, we have not added a judge for 15 years. We have approximately 140,000 traffic citations come to us a year now, 40,000 criminal matters. We have a number of traffic citations that judges must see, and those are matters you all want them to see, DUIs, excessive speed, certain that do end up, if the person is convicted, jail time could be part of the process. The judge must see those. What happens is we have a number of cases where traffic matters are combined, for example, with a drug paraphernalia charge. Someone is arrested for speeding, and they also have drug paraphernalia on them. Both cases are combined. The traffic matter often tends to get less attention than the other charge. And what we believe we should be doing is separating those. We should be addressing the traffic matters as solely traffic matters. That's one issue. The other is, with 450 new Metro officers coming on the scene, we anticipate, we're already seeing increase in traffic citations because they've gone to an e-cite program.
What is that?
Electronic cites, where the patrolman has an electronic device that produces the citation rather than paper citations. It does provide for easier entrance into our system. it also is generating an additional number of citations. So what we did is we looked at those cases right now, traffic matters, that go to our 6 judges, where if we had a traffic master, they would not need to go. They would not require a judge to hear them. They're combined right now with criminal matters. Those cases would move to a traffic master. The traffic master would approach those cases on a consistent basis with guidelines set by the chief judge and administration. Here's how we want those matters handled. Much like our front counter now handles 80% of the traffic matters that come in now. That traffic master, in the consistency of handling those matters, would enhance fine revenue off of those. And that's the basis upon which that number has been given to you. It's not a matter that the judges, but it also does free court time for the judges to hear, and we will not need to be looking at another judge. This is a less expensive way to do this than to add an additional judge.
Would this gentleman or lady be a lawyer?
Yes. The only requirement that would be different in our judgment in discussions with the city attorney would be that the person would not need to be elected. But all other qualifications would be the same.
Councilman Brown.
Mr. Carmody answered my question. It's not just the numbers that you project as far as revenues. It's the indirect savings with efficiencies in the court.
Yes.
As it currently is.
Thank you. Yes.
Mayor Goodman, please.
Councilman Wilson.
You know how many phone calls I'm going to get because you just suggested that the council has a future appointment? Couple of questions. If this is a revenue enhancer, if you will, why not have 2 commissioners or 3 commissioners?
I think the number would depend on the workload and what can be done by 1 commissioner versus 2. Right now, we're in serious discussions with the city attorney's office on all aspects. Please remember that what I've shown you are preliminary numbers. We know the number of traffic cases that go to the courtrooms that could be removed from the courtroom. But what we need to decide is a number of other matters, what kind of cases the traffic master will hear, how they will get there, pretrial issues. There's a number of issues that I'm in discussion with Mr. Jervik and Mr. Little. The traffic we're suggesting right now, the cost would be 1. I don't think it would make sense to go beyond that if we couldn't see how revenues would then be enhanced, and I'm not sure there's a 1-to-1 ratio on that.
Secondly, obviously this is all contingent upon the legislature allowing us to open up our charter. We should know that in the next 60 days or so, whether that bill passes. If that bill passes, most bills go into effect October 1st unless otherwise delineated. This bill might be like that. Why do we have to wait till 2008 then to have a commissioner?
Well, what we're planning right now is January of 2008, and the reason for that is we have a new case management system that's being implemented in the fall, and that is going to change all procedures, case management procedures, case flow procedures, to put a new program in and re-engineer our old system to accommodate that, and then 3 months later re-engineer it would not be cost effective. We'd be better off to wait.
I was thinking fiscal 08, but you're talking about calendar year.
I'm talking about calendar 08.
We're talking 8, 9, 10 months away in theory. Okay, thank you.
Would the traffic master try cases?
That's an issue that is being discussed. That's one of the issues that if you have the issue of, well, that's an issue that I'm discussing with the city attorney right now, and I can't give you a definitive answer on that.
Because if the traffic master did not try cases, then that would do away with the need of metro officers who are giving the tickets, showing up and spending hour after hour waiting for a proceeding to be called. That could be a big money saver if that could be analyzed.
We are currently attempting to look at all of those facets.
Mayor Pro Tem?
I think also that needs to be put on the record here also right now is that I think the sheriff's up at Carson City trying to have the legislature allow them to put some cameras up on some of the intersections also, to where they can get ticketed for running the red lights or speeding through the intersections and stuff too, which would also be one of these type of things where I don't think they'd have to have the police officer show up for the court hearing. And he thinks they'll probably give us an opportunity to test it temporarily.
While he's up there, I wish he would figure out some cameras to get graffiti people.
Exactly.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I think the graffiti people are placing their caps in certain areas so we can't get their faces as we put up the videos. That's what I've been told by Metro, that they're always one step ahead, it seems. We get people to put in, the video cameras, and then the next thing you see is they cover their faces now when they're doing it. But I wanted to ask Councilman Pro Tem, Mr. Reese, what you were talking about. So is that we need to get the approval from the state in order to have those types of lights, camera lights?
Yeah, well, yes.
So, because I'd had some questions about that, and this is not something then that the council could do by itself. It would be, you'd have to get the approval of the legislature first.
For the traffic offenders at the intersections, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cronin.
Yes.
Centennial Hills Community Center. This is a 98,000 square foot community center that's due to come online in July. We are currently negotiating with the YMCA. In fact, I think we have the contract coming on board next council meeting. As a result of what we were trying to accomplish with the YMCA contract, we have an issue with Article 33 of our bargaining agreement with the LVCEA. And in that process of negotiating through the grievance, we had a settlement agreement that said we were going to add 7 new positions for that operation. I think 3 of them were maintenance and custodial positions, and 4 were new positions to help run the senior center operation, which the YMCA was not interested in operating. Under this tentative budget, we're talking about not funding any new positions. So now the question comes, what do we do? If we don't honor that agreement, what can we do? And you can see here on the slide of thoughts that staff has is we could ask the YMCA, at least on a temporary basis, to perform the routine maintenance and custodio, which in fact was included in the original RFP, and they did actually agree to do that. And the second item is, what do we do with the senior center? If the senior center needs to be open, do we relocate the Northwest Senior Center from Lone Mountain to the new Centennial Hills, which is the recommendation here, or not open it? And that would be another option, and maybe there's a third option that I haven't thought of. But that's what this item's all about. If we don't add the 7 new positions, how do we operate Centennial Hills? What are we going to do?
Ricketts?
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. It's a pleasure to be here to talk to you. Unfortunately, under these circumstances, as a city employee and a taxpayer, I feel for the tasks at hand that you have to look at. I had prepared copies of the agreement, a settlement agreement that we reached with the City of Las Vegas. Unfortunately, a 4-page document, I'm missing page 3 on those, so I'm sure you can get them, but just a brief overview on my perspective on this agreement. Basically, a couple of highlights. It says staff will recommend the filling of those positions to council. I understand the atmosphere and everything that we're dealing with that's been presented to you. However, this was part of an agreement, and if we have a settlement agreement where it's contingent upon the council approving the funding of those positions, it's an agreement. If that doesn't take place, I guess my question to you is, what do we do from here? Is the agreement void? Do you direct staff to sit down and renegotiate? The second component, as is suggested in the fourth bullet point, to have the YMCA perform the custodial and the maintenance that is required by 3 of the positions out of the 7 that was requested. since that's already in an agreement, if the city I'm told by our legal counsel that if the city negotiates a contract with the YMCA to cover that work, there could be some legal issues there since we're not at the table. So if that does take place, I would request that we were present to represent our interests. But I would ask you at this time to find a way to live up to the agreement so that we can move on and the citizens of Ward 6 can get the benefits of this facility.
Yes.
Thank you.
I would just ask, Mark, what are you looking from the council on this item today?
Well, I think I am looking for, staff's looking for a little direction.
Today?
I think
Well, I'm sure that Councilman Ross has probably been more involved, and probably Councilman Brown, than the rest of us have. It was mentioned to me in a briefing as just a quick passing comment that we was going to have to do, something out here. But again, though, I haven't been into, to me, a deep enough conversation to make any kind of recommendation at all today. That's just the way I feel.
Obviously, some of the priority setting gets to be the issue. If we don't have sufficient revenue to honor this agreement, much less the position requests we got from the departments, if we can't fund new positions, then the question is, what's the priority? What do we do with this agreement, and when do we honor it? And so the question then becomes, for example, it was posed to me that perhaps what we should do is agree that as soon as we have additional money, that the first thing we should do with that additional operating money is hire these 7 positions. And my answer to that was, well, I'm not sure that I'm in position to recommend that to council. It could very well be that 6 months from now, when the revenue's there, the council may decide that we need to hire additional city marshals or firemen because that is a higher priority. I don't know. And so, but that is an option. The council could give me direction today, or give staff direction today, that as soon as the first pocket of operating revenue is available, that we honor this commitment. That is an option.
Brad? What's Mr. Ricketts asked his first question? What is the status of under these circumstances?
I've asked Mr. Davis of my office to come down here. I am generally familiar with this. I think that there are some options. If I could ask Morgan to come to the podium, and he'll be glad to answer your question, Your Honor.
Good morning, Mayor, Council, and Morgan Davis, Las Vegas City Attorney's Office. It is true, in fact, that a settlement agreement was reached, and the language that Mr. Ricketts refers to does indicate that staff was going to recommend the positions, but it also includes the language and the anticipation any approval of positions is contingent upon subject to council approval and or augmentation. It was always anticipated these positions are going to be for you to decide if they can be funded.
Okay, well, basically then, what is the answer to Mr. Ricketts' question? If we do not fund those positions, then there's no deal.
The terms of the agreement would be that any other consideration that was given, I guess, can go back. There were some other things that were being bargained away, some things that were getting benefit to the city and to the association. Obviously, if the agreement can't be completed or fulfilled, it would leave us without having an agreement. One of the other important elements of this agreement, as you recall, was trying to get our handle over the entire concept of contracting out and going back to the table and resolving these kind of issues in the future, and we have been doing that, and we're doing that. That was another important element of the settlement agreement, get back at the table and let's resolve the whole issue aside from this. But as it relates to this agreement, they had a grievance pending over our attempts or our indications that we were going to use the YMCA to operate the facility for us. They settled that grievance in exchange for the anticipated 7 positions. 7 positions aren't funded. It's conceivable that they may want to go forward with their grievance. They may want to go back to the table and negotiate a substitute agreement. Realities are, Mr. Vincent was of a mindset when we negotiated the agreement that staff could recommend these. Finances are such we can't recommend them anymore.
Yes, Councilor Brown.
Just a question on understanding Article 33 has been an issue for a couple years now, but when we talk about this agreement, and I found out, I had heard about an agreement, got some details, Mr. Rickett was kind enough to fill me in. But wouldn't, separate from the new positions, wouldn't an agreement in itself, if it's a negotiation with the CEA, have to come before council?
The two important requirements or eventual events under the agreement, one of which was going to be the funding and the positions, and the mechanism we put in place was if the YMCA opens operating for us, then we will do that, and that was something that had to come back in front of you. So it was built into the process before that ever happened. It had to come to you for approval. There was another part of the agreement that was going to have to come back in front of council as well. If we ever got a resolution to Article 33, we were going to have a new contract provision, but that would have to come back in front of you as well. So both the requirements, it was anticipated that we were negotiating in the spirit of cooperation and these things were going to be resolved, but whether they got there or not, we don't know, but they would have both had to come back to you at that time.
Was it, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Just when was, is there a date on the agreement when it was reached?
September 29th.
Also in the agreement, it references some settlement conferences where an offer was made in April of 2006, and the agreement itself was executed September of last year.
And when you say executed, and that's just, from my knowledge, executed means?
Signed.
And that is done without council approval?
Under the terms of this agreement, that was correct. The agreement basically said, we're going to try to work these things out, and if this happens, we'll come back to council for the position funding. If the other component is we resolve Article 33, we'll bring the article back to council.
And normally when we have our closed-door personnel sessions with CEA and the fire and Metro, there's usually updates or policy direction or where we're at, but this doesn't fall on that level. This is an agreement made basically at the staff level between the CEA and HR. That's executed, but executed ultimately 8 months later before council approving positions.
Well, is the agreement subject to our approval as a council?
No, just the positions.
No, I'm asking, is the agreement subject to our approval as a council, or was this done independent of the council and the mayor?
I don't believe the agreement would have called for expenditures or any other requirement or action that they needed to come before council.
But did we have to ratify the terms of the agreement?
The settlement agreement, I don't believe needed to be ratified by council independently. The two acts that hopefully came out of the settlement agreement would come back before you, but the settlement agreement, I don't believe you needed to ratify that, no.
And is it contemplated under that agreement there'd be 7 new city employees, or are we talking about 7 city employees who'd be assigned to this project?
New.
You agree with that?
Yes, I do, Your Honor. If I could just point out real quick, when I signed this agreement and it was executed, as Morgan referenced, in September 29th of 06, I looked at the city's first quarter physical or review of the quarter, and the C-tax, it did recognize, was flat. It was at 1%. Everybody in the room basically agreed, and I felt there was good faith there, that unless there was a disaster, that there should be no problem having this happen. I was briefed on this yesterday. I checked the second quarter, which came out, review by the city, that came out December 30th of 06, basically says that it's still flat and it's 0.7%. So that's 0.3 less. So based on that, we're really caught in a position wanting to move forward. The last thing I want to do is to go the other direction. However, we still have an agreement. We would like to find a way to get this resolved, but of course that's up to this council.
All right, thank you.
Mayor Goodman.
Yes, Councilman.
Today's meeting is just a workshop. We're not making any final decisions today, and I think that this is a unique situation because we have this separate agreement which has an effect on some decisions we make as compared to other budgetary decisions we make where there aren't separate employee agreements. So we're all going to get briefed, I imagine, and Mr. Jerbick is going to be part, forget your last name.
Davis.
Davis is going to be part of that, but we're not making decisions today. This is just a workshop to work towards making decisions at our May meeting. Is that right?
That's generally right. There's only one other added complication to this, and that is where we are with the negotiations with the YMCA, because some of these decisions, particularly the maintenance and custodial, does affect the YMCA agreement. So it's like the perfect storm going on here, that some of these things do have to be resolved fairly quickly. They don't have to be resolved today, no, but they have to be resolved fairly quickly so that we can move forward with the YMCA contract.
For whatever it's worth, I don't understand why the council and myself were not brought into an approval process or ratification of this a long time ago. Because had we ratified it a long time ago, this being a non-issue today, we'd have to keep our word. But the fact that we're left out of the process, I don't understand that on something of this import. I really don't.
Mayor,
Could anybody explain why?
if I may, I'll take a stab at it. I think there are a couple of things going on. One, when the agreement was reached, the settlement agreement was reached, the performance at that time of our C-tax and other revenue sources, we had 1 month's worth of data, July. So basically, we were looking at last year's performance, and I think Mark felt like we were going to be able to add the necessary positions to live up to this end of the deal. Secondly, we make it our practice to brief you all every week, and we try to make sure that we keep these things up to speed on these kinds of agreements that happen offline. Maybe in this circumstance, we should have convened a personnel session and had a longer discussion with you about this. I think there were a lot of things that were going on in the fall related to our ability to contract out, the negotiations with the YMCA after the direction that we were supposed to negotiate with the YMCA. There was a need to reach a settlement, and I think we thought we could afford it. And maybe at that time, we should have had a closed-door personnel session regarding it. But I think in our minds, procedurally, typically when we add positions is not in the middle of the year when it has a general fund impact. We do it as a part of the budget process, not back in September. So it's not likely that even had we brought this matter before you in whichever forum, we wouldn't have been asking you to authorize the creation of the positions then. We would have been doing it now. In fact, one of the schedule for the approval of the settlement, the 7 positions, was supposed to be simultaneous with the approval of the YMCA contract, which was hopefully scheduled for next week. In fact, the YMCA contract is scheduled for your consideration next week. This matter probably will not be able to be considered at that meeting because we don't have the funding to authorize the positions. So it could be looking back on it, and looking back's always, a lot easier than looking forward. I think we thought we were informing adequately. Looking back on it, we probably should have, with this magnitude of an impact, maybe considered calling a closed-door personnel session to discuss this particular agreement so that all the council could have provided feedback to us through these negotiations.
Councilor Ross?
Are you ready for me? Couple of things here, and thank you, Betsy, for that explanation to the mayor. And Your Honor, I appreciate the opportunity. Mr. Ricketts and Mr. Davis, I want to share a few thoughts with you in regards to this entire process. Timeliness, the timeliness of the fact that our C-taxes are down and this is where we are financially, the YMCA's contract before us, our commitment, Mr. Ricketts, to the CEA, which I plan to follow through with, and I want you to recognize that, as well as this entire council and the city staff. An agreement is an agreement. I would like not to see you go back to the grievance process. I would like not to see our staff go back and start renegotiating with the CEA. This has been my intention from day one, and the city manager's office knows that. The city attorney's office knows that. CEA knows that. And I want to continue to go in this direction. We're in a challenging position now. We need to move forward with these items as quickly as possible. And I'm going to ask staff here in a minute a direct question. And Mr. Ricketts, actually Mr. Davis, you guys are making progress for both of you. in regards to Article 33 and discussions with that. I don't want that to slow down. I want that momentum to keep going. I want these issues worked out, and we go on. I'm going to look forward a little bit instead of looking backwards and say, let's do some good things. The situation we're in today, the 7 positions for the Centennial Hills Community Center, the negotiations with the YMCA, I don't want this to fall through the crack. I want to move on from today, and Betsy, I think we need to move forward today so we don't lose this momentum, both with the Y and Mr. Ricketts, both with the CEA. You have my commitment. I only speak as one vote on this council to continue in this direction as I committed to you before. And I have no intention of going backwards. And Mr. Davis, I think you know that of me as well. I know the city's manager office does. Now, to Mr. Vincent, here we are. We want to honor our agreement with the CEA in these 7 new positions. We discussed some options with the Northwest Senior Center, trying to shuffle some things around. Have we explored all of our options financially? Or is this something we can agree to today, to approve these 7 new positions with a council vote, continue with our negotiations with the YMCA, and get them to move forward with their commitment to the City of Las Vegas? And as the time permits, Mr. Vincent, can we, when the CTAX revenues rise, can we make this a priority and fund these 7 new positions and do this in cooperation with the CEA, so we're showing good faith?
The answer to that question, Councilman, is that you certainly can make, the council certainly can make that a priority. And as I said before, one option would be, which was posed to me, is can staff make a commitment that when those revenues are there from whatever means, will they go first to these 7 positions? And I didn't feel I could make that commitment. That's something that I think you all could certainly do if that's the direction you wanted to go.
Well, it's quite challenging. And as I've reviewed some numbers here in revenues, Ward 6 is just exploding. I've had discussion with the chief in regards to those new marshals. Huge priority. Protecting our citizens at the parks. Huge priority. And she knows that and I've got her commitment to do that. But here we are again. We need 8 new marshals, and we just don't have the dollars for it. And Mr. Ricketts, I don't want to go backwards on negotiations. I don't think you do either. I kind of need you to indicate to us what kind of flexibility you'll give to us so we can honor our commitment to the CEA and continue to do what we can do with the dollars that we've got.
I think, Councilman Ross, through you, Your Honor, it would be my position representing the LVCEA that I think it's appropriate for this council to give staff direction to work with us to find a solution. The commitment is there. When I was briefed yesterday by Mark and Claudette on this issue in Morgan, I think that offer was there. Unfortunately, we were caught in a situation, none of us in the room wanted to go backwards. However, legally, what does that do with the agreement and then with the negotiating of the agreement with the Y? Those issues have to be worked out, and I don't think anybody was prepared because it all requires direction from the council for us to move forward so we can come up with that agreement.
But you're saying to us today that you feel comfortable if we direct staff to try to work it out?
Correct. I think direction is needed, and that's, Mark and I thought it would be a good idea for both of us to be here. And so, the last thing that we're trying to do, I know the city manager is committed to improve the labor management relationship. It was part of the budget goals for last year. I think the city manager's office has moved forward in that direction, and we are committed to it.
And I'd like to say, Your Honor, if I may, that we're committed to you as well in regards to those labor management negotiations and relationships. Huge priority to me, personally, and I know you recognize that, and I know the city manager's office does as well. In this situation, though, I think we need to move forward. I think we need you on board with us as we do this. This isn't going to be forever. Our revenues are not going to be flat forever. Again, I'm being very optimistic, but I think I'm right on the money. Mr. Vincent is shaking his head in the affirmative, and I think he's with me. So patience is important, but also timing is important right now. We need to move forward so we can get this facility open. whether YMCA's cleaning the restrooms or I'm cleaning the restrooms, it doesn't matter. It needs to get done, and we need to provide these services to the residents of Ward 6. And I know you're with me on that commitment, Mr. Ricketts, as well as Mr. Vincent. So that would be my recommendation, is to move forward and authorize, Your Honor, if I may, authorize staff to work very closely with Mr. Ricketts in making these things happen just as quickly as possible.
Okay, Councilman Ross, through you, Your Honor, if I might, at least so that I can get a clear understanding, since my legal counsel isn't here, is the fact that a question was asked yesterday to Mr. Vincent, basically at the recommendation to have the YMCA do those on a temporary basis. I was reminded that there are some legal issues regarding the settlement. So I just want to make sure that that's aware, and that we move forward in a quick manner. But the question was asked, if the YMCA took over those positions and the city actually had to pay for them, or it was negotiated into their contract, then why couldn't we just fill the positions? I believe, Mr. Vincent, you said that was an interesting point, or there was almost a zero-sum game. So those are just some of the issues that I'm trying to address based on my legal counsel's questions and recommendations.
Mayor, timing is the issue with that. Originally, as I mentioned earlier, originally when the RFP went out, it was contemplated that the routine maintenance custodial would be performed by the awarded contractor, in this case YMCA. When we got involved in the Article 33 discussions and the grievance and settlement of that, we came back to YMCA. We said, no, we're going to provide that for you. As we went on through the negotiations, what we told the YMCA was, since you originally proposed a plan that included you providing your own maintenance custodial, that we should get a credit back for that, which is what Mr. Ricketts is speaking about. In other words, we shouldn't have to pay you for something you were already going to provide. They agreed to that, except in the course of this process, we also have, in their proposal, they needed, I think, $400,000 in pre-operational funding. We were not able to give them that $400,000. We cut it down to, I think, $50,000 roughly in pre-operational funding. They came back and said, okay, for the first year, we can't give you that credit because you're making us have to put up more pre-operational costs than we originally proposed. So since we have to pay more for pre-op, we don't want to give you a credit back for the custodial in the first year. So what I mentioned yesterday to Mr. Ricketts and his staff was that it would seem that it should be zero-sum, but in the first year it's not zero-sum because we're not going to get a credit from the YMCA for the providing of that custodial because of what we had to negotiate out of the pre-op costs. So again, I view this as a temporary situation, and but for fiscal year 08, we're not going to get a credit back.
And Mayor Pro Tem, if I may. With that thought, I think within a year we're going to have these positions filled. I mean, that's how optimistic I am about this rebound. I don't see this lasting for very long.
Well, and Mayor Pro Tem, through you, it very well may be that we could work out triggers that would satisfy the LVCVA as to what things would happen that would trigger the funding of the new positions. And that's kind of, we haven't had time to talk about that, and that's kind of what we're talking about here. We need to have some time to work out, if not these 7 now, then what and when, and how does that get triggered?
Well, and through the Mayor Pro Tem, I think heading in that direction, Mr. Ricketts, and you guys working closely together on this, I'll be watching it. I'll be being briefed by staff continuously, and I'll be there if I need to be as well. But Mr. Vincent, I think also if there are other items in Ward 6 where I can scale back from, that we are not getting the biggest bang from our buck and we need to move forward with this, I have no problem with that, and I'll have to follow your financial guidance in regards to that. You know, as I look at your list here on my screen, the community center, Floyd Lamb Park at Tule Springs, I mean, we've got to do all we can, and we're just so limited with the dollars we're receiving as revenue right now from your reports. So with that in mind, I know the CEA understands this. This is not an unusual concept. You only have so many dollars, you can only spend so many dollars. So I would recommend then, through the mayor to staff, that we keep the momentum going. We authorize these 7 positions and work in good faith with the LVCEA in trying to fill them as quickly as possible. I will get rumors from, or I'll get mumbles from the community about moving the Northwest Senior Center. A lot of folks really enjoy that location. I think once they recognize the opportunities at the new community center at Centennial Hills, that they'll quickly change their minds. But these are hard decisions, and Mr. Ricketts, you're right. We're in a interesting position as the city council and the mayor in dealing with these challenges. Appreciate you understanding that, and I know your members do as well. So with that, I'd like to move forward with that recommendation, if I may, Your Honor.
All right, Mayor Pro Tem, and then Councilman Brown.
Right, Council.
All right, Councilman Brown.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm in support of what the councilman's saying, and certainly echo the comments as far as Mr. Ricketts and the agreement. But what I'm real uncomfortable is the precedent that sets as far as a negotiated agreement that we're not aware of being tied into new positions where that gives them some kind of priority. And let's be honest, these are maintenance workers at a facility that contractually offered originally to pay for all the maintenance. So I'm real uncomfortable with the precedent setting that these 7 positions are the priority for our budget opposed to some of the needs that have been identified in 170 positions. Not that they're wrong, and not that I question the agreement, but the process we're looking at is somehow these positions are now leveraged to the top, and that just, I can't support that. I mean, it's tough enough when we're deciding between police officers, firefighters, marshals, detention enforcement, all the public safety issues. And if somehow we're going to create an instant or a precedent where that competitive budget process annually is somehow circumvented, I can't support that. I certainly support what the councilman's saying as far as Article 33. And that seems to be the issue. I mean, Article 33, from my understanding, was a poorly written article adopted a few years back that has caused nothing but problems. Understanding that right now we're negotiating to figure out what Article 33 means. That's the issue. Fix Article 33, but don't use that as a circumvention of a process that's been in place since I've been on this council. I'm real uncomfortable with that. It's a bad omen.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, and again, we have another slide here, I think, that has to do with Floyd Lamb State Park. And during my briefing, when we was talking about hiring the new marshals, and I don't know how this is going to affect, I guess my concerns kind of goes along with what Councilman Brown was alluding to also. Okay, if we don't get the new marshals, and I feel like in my ward I don't have enough marshal coverage as it is. So we're going to, like Councilman Brown said, we're going to put these 7 positions up here, we're not going to be able to hire these marshals. So now instead of having the marshals to go out to Floyd Lamb State Park as well as Centennial Hills, they're going to take some of these marshals away from the area where I feel like I'm underserved now. And I really have a lot of questions too. And again, I support what Councilman Ross is trying to do here. But again, though, it's really, to me, not the right way. And I'll even talk to Betsy a little bit too about us not being briefed about all this before. You know, and I think we are setting a terrible precedent here. But again, though, at this time, and it may be better next month, or 2 or 3 months from now. But again, we have pressing needs that we have to meet right now, and I feel like that. I was going to make these comments when we were talking about Floyd Lamb State Park, as far as the needs I have in my ward for my marshals in my parks.
I'm not going to be critical of the process. I've already made my position known. I felt that this should have been brought before us for ratification or for approval. If it had been, and we approved it, this would be a non-issue. I mean, our word is our bond, and we would be legally bound, but that's not the case, and these are...
For them, we are legally bound.
I don't think we're legally bound. I think this is a moral obligation, but I don't think, we're not legally bound.
Morally, yeah, I feel so.
Mr. Mayor?
These are real serious issues, particularly when it comes to, we basically had a policy, it may not have been in cement at the time, but we weren't hiring people. Was that policy suspended without some legal justification or an analysis? Was that policy suspended? Was that policy part of this settlement process?
Are you talking about the position justification committee?
Yes.
Or are you talking about the creation of positions?
Creation of positions?
The typical process to create a position is kind of what you see before you, but typically not quite like this. Annually during the budget cycle, we bring a recommended operating budget that has some number of positions in it to you for consideration. And you approve them or you don't. You authorize the funding for them or you don't. In some circumstances, we've created positions with no funding. That's happened before too. So that's where the positions are authorized and approved for hire, if you will. Once you authorize those positions, the 3,000 some that we have in the city, then we work through our recruiting process and live up to the expectations of hiring those, unless there's an economic condition that prevents us or precludes us from doing that.
Okay, and that was going to be my next issue with Brad. Assuming that am I right that this is a moral obligation at this point rather than a legal obligation on the part of the council?
And it's totally discretionary.
Okay. But assuming, for the sake of argument, we're a legal obligation, and assuming further that the C-tax was in such a level that we do not feel comfortable in funding it, is that like a force majeure or like an intervening force which would excuse us from a legal obligation?
Well, again, it's not a legal, there's no legal obligation.
I understand that. It's a moral obligation.
Right.
But I'm saying, assume it were a legal obligation. Does the fact if, God forbid in the future,
right,
the C-tax hits the tank, okay?
Right.
Are we then excused from fulfilling our legal obligations?
I think it is ample justification to cast a no vote against a new position when you haven't got the money to pay for the new position.
That's not my question. My question is, assuming it were a legal commitment or not.
If it were a legal commitment, I think it would be a force majeure. It depends how your force majeure clause is phrased in any contract, and most contracts do have a force majeure provision. But if an intervening act that was unanticipated was falling revenues, and that's exactly what happened, and you called that out in your contract, absolutely that would relieve you of the obligation to do it. In fact, every position in the city falls under that classification. We have a right to RIF people, we have a right to let go of people, we have a right to cut back staff if there aren't revenues for it. So if it applies to existing positions, that circumstance certainly would apply to funding new positions.
All right, thank you. Yes, Councilor Brown.
I just wanted to clarify, Mr. Ricketts, my understanding from what you said today is not necessarily that you want us to vote approval of those. You're understanding our situation financially. You just want us to keep good faith and fund them as soon as possible? Am I understanding that correctly or not?
Your Honor, through you to Councilwoman Tarkanian, my position is, I was only briefed last night by Mr. Vincent. I was given a document today. I was given a presentation that's been given to you. I don't feel comfortable saying because I haven't been involved.
That's fair.
I haven't been involved in negotiations with the Y or even understand the construction level of Centennial Hills on this whole agreement. What I did say is that I'm in a position wanting to continue forward in good faith and upholding our bargain because I think it is in the best interest of the city and the taxpayers. Where we are kind of in the gray area is that there is an agreement to reach a settlement of a grievance that's not in anybody's interest to go put back on the burner, but staff needs some direction, and I think we need to be directed in a way that maybe we can come up with a plan or negotiate something that would satisfy our needs and my members' best interest, and also help the city in its obligations and circumstances that's being presented to you right
So
now.
you would understand if we would need to have time to look into this more fully ourselves, because I agree with Councilman Reese. I also have a great need for marshals, and in addition to that, a great need for code enforcement officers, which I assume he has also. So,
The commitment is there, and I'll continue to do that every time I come before you. I think that I'm here to represent the best interest of my members and also the city of Las Vegas. So.
Yes, Councilman Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Rickardson. Appreciate you being on the hot seat today. The grievance that this agreement is settling, was that a grievance related to Article 33?
Yes, it was, Councilman. It was regarding Centennial Hills and the process of Article 33.
I'll certainly support your desire to keep moving in a positive direction to resolve this, but the issue is Article 33. I mean, this is just a subset because we can't figure out what Article 33 means. Say if it takes 2 more years and another grievance is filed for an Article 33, we could have this before us next year in a different situation, maybe outside maintenance contract or outside sprinkler contract. I would just ask that the manager's office accelerate as best we can a resolution of Article 33. That would clean up the mess. And how long has Article 33 been on the books now? 4 or 5 years?
Since 2000, Councilman. If I may,
Yes, please.
Your Honor, Councilman Brown, one component of the settlement agreement was that we would withhold filing any grievances over Article 33 to actually formulate a process that would assure my membership that decisions that are being made, if needed, to exercise your right or management right to contract out of service or a component of what we employees or a business component of the city of Las Vegas, that we would actually feel comfortable, not challenge it, but also have an atmosphere to competitively compete. I think that there was a spirit of cooperation. The meetings that we have had have been very successful. So I think your position on Article 33, as well as a lot of people, is going to be irrelevant if we can continue to move forward, because everybody that is involved in this process, I believe, shares that opinion with me.
And I respect that, but what I'd like to see is get the negotiating team in a room, lock the doors, spend a week, and get Article 33 settled. Or this is going to be reoccurring. And Article 33, critically important for the union rights and for management rights. So let's figure it out. And if a grievance is the way to get to court to settle it or mitigate it or finalize it, that may be easier than spending the past 6 years doing all these little subsets. Granted, the last year of the commitment from the city manager's office to strengthen the relationship obviously is bearing fruit here. And certainly don't want to slow that down, but I would just like to see this resolved as quickly as possible.
Does anybody have a copy of Article 33?
I don't have it with me. I can certainly get it for you.
All right, I'd like that. Thank you. All right. All right, well, I think we've talked that one out. Why don't we go on to the next one?
Thank you, Your Honor. If I could, just on behalf of the over 1,600 classified city employees that I represent, we have and we continue to go the extra mile and taking on any added responsibility or needs as necessary to carry out the best interests of the city. So thank you for recognizing that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. Floyd Lamb State Park, in addition to the 8 additional marshals that were requested by detention and enforcement, part of which would allow expanded service to Floyd Lamb State Park, are not being funded. In addition to that, Leisure Service requested 2 customer service reps to more or less operate the gate control, which we're not funding. And so some questions that we're struggling with that we need to answer between now and May. There's a question about whether or not the admission fees, if we charge an emission, much like the state did, say $6 a car, that those emission fees, would they be sufficient to cover the cost of the two gate persons? I think there's a belief that just having someone operating the gate, there is at least an appearance of some measure of control and security would go a long way to keeping the park perhaps a little safer. We also discussed with Councilman Ross the idea of park ambassadors. If we can't staff gate controllers, is a way that we could look at perhaps some volunteerism, much like you see with state parks and federal parks, where they have parks ambassadors that are people that have essentially retired that do this sort of as a free service. So those are a couple things that we need to look at in order to bring Floyd Lamb up and operational. In addition to that, the fact that field operations did receive in this budget, 07's budget, positions that they had requested for late this year hiring to support Floyd Lamb Park. The fact that we have 130 acres of new parks coming on next year is nonetheless going to spread them thin. So I think the level of service that he had anticipated being able to provide at this park is going to be diminished because of the inability to fund the other positions that he requested for next year.
Do we have any idea how much the state made as far as admission fees?
I believe it was about $200,000 a year, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's pretty close to it. I don't believe the State Park Service felt that the revenue that they were generating was paying for, or at least paying for all of the cost of operating that gate. But it could go a long way towards paying. So that's something I think we need to look at as a potential.
Well, I think yesterday during our briefing we talked about ambassadors. A lot of people in the community really want to participate in government. We know that from the programs that the manager has set up as far as community participation and getting to know what the city is all about. I think we really have to start emphasizing, that's some direction I'd like to give to the manager's office, exploring the use of our citizens who want to feel like they're part of the community and will be on a volunteer basis, what type of liability we have for them, whether or not we want to have them uniformed, whether we want to formalize the process. But I think we're at that point that we have to look at alternative means in order to meet the needs that we're going to be faced.
Your Honor, to Mayor Pro Tem or the manager's office, A, when does this trigger take effect and it become a city property? B, wasn't there some language as far as transitional maintenance or some kind of overlap? And C, is there anything in the original legislation that differentiates this park from any other city park?
Let me go backwards. I think the only differentiation is that you can't change the name in state law. There was a transition period. That's what we've been going through for the last 2 years, where the state agreed to maintain it over the course of the last 2 years while we worked out a transition plan. The effective transfer, I believe, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, is July 1. So that's why we're gearing up for that now. Did I get all of them?
Is that it?
Right.
Yes, Councilor Wilson.
On the Floyd Lamb State Park issue, how much money are we talking about that we are unable to fund for purposes? Are we just talking about the 2 customer service reps for gate control?
I can tell you I'm doing this by memory, so I might not get this exactly accurate, but when we first started this transition process and looking in terms of the maintenance costs related to the park, security and marshals, we talked about. At one time went from one extreme was we should have 2 marshals 24/7, which translates, I forget what that number translates, but it's probably 10 marshals to have 24/7 coverage. So we've gone from that extreme. I think the most reasonable estimate that I saw in terms of what it was going to cost us incrementally, exclusive of any gate revenues, just the incremental cost to operate the park, was in the neighborhood of $500,000 to $700,000 a year to operate and maintain it in the fashion that the city standards at other parks. And so, again, remember I said part of this is about changing some of our expectations, if nothing other than at least for a 12 to 18-month period, this park's not going to be able to be maintained to those standards. And but that was roughly the number that I recall. I may be off a little bit, but I think the reasonable number is that $500,000 to $700,000 range.
But the park is still going to be open and still going to be an amenity that our citizens can enjoy, regardless of what fiscal impact we're about to take or not take. Isn't that right?
Councilman, you were absolutely right. I think the biggest concern with this park is its sheer size, in the fact that it's probably, there's a concern, particularly with some of the facilities that are on it that are going to be prone to vandalism and that sort of thing. And but the sheer size of the park, I mean, obviously it would be the largest acreage that we would have. So that's a big part of what's driving some of those costs. But it's still going to be there, it's still going to be open. It'll be open from, the plant is operated from dawn to dusk, which is the current schedule, 7 days a week.
Thank you.
Yes.
So separate from the sheer size, and Ms. Fretwell, correct me if I'm wrong, the concern from the state is they just could not maintain it anymore. The maintenance had just gone down almost to, or down to a level that was not tolerable from the state, from the constituents. So what would be the thought process to hire people at the gate? If we're not, separate from the sheer size, this is going to be a city park.
The only thought process, I'm not sure I can answer, but I'll do the best I can.
Right, Your Honor, Mark, Your Honor, may I? Before you do, Mr. Vincent?
Yes,
Councilman, if
certainly.
I may. You have to keep in mind my thoughts on the park, Councilman. Not only is it a city park, but there is historical significance and value to this entire valley. As Councilman Wolfson said, people in the city are going to be using it, yes, but people from all over the county are going to be using it. The concern about vandalism on some of the historic facilities out there, these are historic buildings that have been there for many, many years, that the Cactus Group, the preservation group at Tule Springs has been trying to maintain for years, and it's been a challenge. The state hasn't been real cooperative, from what I understand, to help them do what they want to do out there. We have an opportunity now as a city of Las Vegas to not only have the largest park within Clark County altogether, but to also continue to bring that historic value in nature back to what it used to be. Of course, you know we've applied for Southern Nevada Public Lands Management Act money to do that. The cost to just maintain this such a large facility is incredible. The legislature required us to have many public meetings in regards to what the new park's going to look like in regards to expansion. That is available today, and Greenways Incorporated took care of that for us, and fabulous. The $6 per carload, I think, is the current amount of money, Mr. Vincent, that the state is currently requiring. A couple of things here. We want people to use that park and enjoy it throughout this valley, and that's what's going to happen. Because of the size and enormity, because of its historical value, I am supporting that $6 a carload to get through the gate, to come into the park. A couple of things. It will keep out those who are not in the park just to have a wonderful time with their family. I believe it will keep the
riffraff.
The riffraff, for a better term. Thank you, Your Honor. You knew where I was going with that. It'll keep the riffraff out. I've got genuine concerns about 24-hour security. Great conversations with the chief in regards to the marshals out there. And I certainly don't want to diminish the marshals' impact throughout the rest of this city. That's not the goal here. But as we continue to grow, as people continue to move into this valley and enjoy the wonderful amenities that the city has to give, you know, I'm looking at this park a little differently, and I think we need to do the same as a council. And I would ask you to at least open your mind to that as we progress through this transition period, because it's different in nature. The colossal size of it alone, but also the historical value. So that's the direction I'm going with that, Councilman, and I want you to understand that. Thank you, Your Honor.
To Councilman Ross, I try to keep an open mind, especially when it comes to parks on this council, but the benefit you have with this treasure is you have so many active groups out there that will help with the historic preservation, that will help with annual cleanups, that will help be park ambassadors. My simple question is, why would we put customer service reps to collect money at the gate when there are so many other, that's the culture, because that's the way we've done it in the past, or that's the way the state did it. But the state, the process of trying to handle that, that's why we got it now, because that's not a money-making operation. So the car loads and the fees and all that, it is special, it is different in some ways, but the vandalism that happens at Darling Tennis Center, I think, is just as important as the vandalism that could happen at the state park, that could happen down at one of Councilman Reese or any of our. So I have an open mind to your vision out there and very supportive of it, but not if it turns the culture of how we handle our park and recs, where we're going to create positions out there that could be done in a different and less costly way. That's my only point.
May I comment, Your Honor?
Certainly.
And thank you, Councilman. I appreciate that. The item that Mr. Vincent, we talked about yesterday, the ambassadors. You know, we have a fabulous park ambassador program in the city of Las Vegas right now, enjoyed by many, and grateful for those who serve in that capacity. At Floyd Lamb Tule Springs, there is housed a state park ranger. So we have a facility out there that we could possibly find a retired couple within this community, or and offer them so many months of park ambassadorship. The history and culture is so important, they would also have to be well versed in regards to what's transpired there over the decades of this valley. So there are many options available to us. I'm not sure, hiring two people just to sit at the gate and take money is the idea. I think, and I'm going to follow along the mayor's thoughts here, that we need to expand our horizons in regards to this park ambassadorship. We may have an opportunity here to bring unique, different type of program along with obtaining this park from the state.
Very good. Thank you. Ms. Folder.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Please forgive me. We've taken a change of personnel for a moment.
Why is that?
Personal matters, they'll be attended to momentarily.
I see. Okay.
The next item we had to discuss was the Alexander Wallapai ball fields, and maybe one of the options here in this need not to hire personnel in this tentative budget is to seek private, nonprofit organizations to help maintain and prepare the ball fields for the tournaments. Let the public step up, and some of those organizations step up and partner with the city to maintain the fields that we've built as an asset to them to use. And maybe they can join us in maintaining them and getting them ready as they're going to put their tournaments on. That's one of the options.
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you.
I'm going to give staff a boost here. I'm going to give Big League Dreams a boost here also. Councilman Brown has said many, many times in settings like this about trying to figure out ways to make these parks help pay for themselves, whether it be through signage or cell towers or however it may be. I think that the money that we're investing at this location is comparable to what we're doing down at Freedom Park. And the difference is that when we get Big League Dreams in down at Freedom Park, we are going to be able to receive some revenue from the park. They are going to have their own marshals. They're going to have their own people laying out the fields every day to make sure that they're usable. They're going to have their own people announcing the ball games. They're going to have their own people cleaning up after the games. I think, again, that when we have opportunities like this, and again, I won't take the credit for this because Councilman Brown pushed me into it, I think. But again, it is going to be something that is going to be a benefit for each and every person in Clark County at no cost to the city. And I think that, again, we have uncharted, unfamiliar water here. I think it's going to help us maybe not during where we're going here today with the shortage of our cash, but it's going to show us what we can do in future years, and I think it's going to be a success. So I just want to put those statements on the record.
Thank you. Ms. Folder, no, Mr. Vincent, go ahead. No.
Your Honor, I don't know exactly sure what, if Candy explained the slide, but the concept here was simply that if we could find someone else, a private nonprofit, other than that, then again, for field ops to have to spread their resources to attend to this new facility as well as existing facilities is just going to have an impact.
You're not talking about mowing lawns. You're talking about putting the lines out, putting the
In particular here, the suggestion is exactly that, dealing with the league and tournament play and the setup for those specifically.
Your Honor.
Yes.
Mr. Vincent, while you're away, Candy identified $23 million that she found over the last hour or so. Yeah. Well, this is, I heard about this potential option last night, and certainly was news to me. I guess the project at Alexander Wallapai, I think it's reflective of some of the other ones we've talked about. The worst case scenario is we build these facilities for the public, and then we aren't able to open them. And that's just, it's unacceptable, but it's certainly a worst case scenario that at least we're contemplating now. And this one, in my next meeting with Mr. Rickards, this will be the topic of conversation because it's going to run right into Article 33. But I can assure you that we'll find a way with his support, because he is, I think, a parent first, and his kids have gone through the system, and I think it'd be a travesty for any parent out there to drive by an empty ball field or an empty park or empty community center. But there has to be a way, and maybe what's before us today is an indication that, be it Article 33 or some new article or some new policy direction from the council, these are the examples in changing the culture and changing the way we do business that hopefully it'll be a win-win situation with our represented, our non-represented, and our private non-profit sector out there, that we are able to find a way and a mechanism to provide the services that people have come to expect at the quality they've come to expect in the city. So I guess this is one option, and I'm sure there's some others up there, but understanding, I'd like a little more detail as far as the separation from mowing the grass or handling the facilities versus tournament and league play.
Your Honor, may I?
Yes, Councilman Ross.
Have we ever done that before, Mr. Vincent, where we've actually had a facility and said, this league is going to handle this facility for us, and the programming and the maintenance and the whole 9 yards? Have we ever done that before?
I'm not sure I can answer that question.
May I jump in?
Yes.
At least indirectly we have. I don't think as a formal policy, but Councilman Ross, you're very familiar with our little leagues out in the Northwest. And the ones that seem to have the most success, a.k.a. Mountain Ridge, the city is the lead. They have the great people out there that are doing everything. But that Little League organization has the manpower and the energy to do a lot of the supplemental things to take our guys and gals off the mundane stuff. So I think indirectly there's some relationships that exist in some of our sporting events, but I'm not sure if we've formally ever done it.
We don't have, Your Honor, we don't have policy setting guidelines for that, from what I understand, Councilman. And you mentioned Mountain Ridge, and their opening day will be this Saturday, by the way, and I'm sure the fields will look very pristine. But we talked about thinking outside the box, and as the dollars become smaller, perhaps we need to pursue these type of avenues. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Mayor Tom?
I remember way back when, we're going back probably 25 or 30 years ago, where I played slow pitch softball at Renzi Park, and I know that the city had put out to bid, and a person that used to work for the city operated the league for the city. I only remember his name was Bill something or other, but he was responsible for setting up the league, collecting the fees, and making sure that the fields was kept up and taken care of and mowed and all that kind of stuff. And I know that was back when I first started slow pitch softball.
Vincent?
Your Honor, just two more thoughts. First of all, we talked a little bit about it, but I didn't prepare a slide. We are trying to deal with the issue of opening Fire Station 48 with the Rescue 48 that needs to be funded, as well as dealing with the overtime. And there are a couple things that the city manager's office and my office, in conjunction with the fire rescue department as well as human resources, are looking at. I suspect that when we come back in May that we'll have some kind of a plan to add additional firefighters that will pay for themselves in the reduction of overtime. And I also think that we would have the plan here in terms of how we're looking at funding the additional cost in Fire Station 48 is going to free us up from debt service that we had planned to incur starting this year. Instead of incurring that debt service, we can take that recurring revenue source, I believe, and then use that to staff the Rescue 48. So that's kind of the thought process we're having there, is we're trying to, it's a zero-sum thing, we're just trying to figure it out, and I think we'll be able to do with that. My final comment is I'm really appreciative of the discussion and your patience. I know this is a painful process. It certainly has been painful for me and my staff. Particularly these last few slides are the big ones, that these big facilities, like I said, I personally apologize because I think we should have done a little bit better job at forecasting where the revenue was going to come from to operate these things. But again, I don't think any of us saw the C-Tax just falling off the table. So I do think that this is a temporary situation. I think we just need to weather the storm. As I told City Manager Doug Selvey, I said we need to weather the storm. We just can't go out and start seeding any new fields yet. We just have to get through this downturn, and things I think will pick back up, and then life should get back to normal for us. But we need to find a way to get through this, and this is a reality for us, at least for the next 12 to 18 months.
Thank you very much. There are folks in the audience who are vitally important, of course, to the success of the city, directors of the various departments, key personnel. We'd be delighted to hear from you if you have any suggestions or anything you'd like to bring to our attention that we can mull over or chew the fat on. Carl, you're not working for us yet. Wait. I'm asking the city staff first. Anybody like to talk to us about any issues that you think we should be considering? All right, then I thank you very much, Mr. Vincent, for a tremendous presentation, and really appreciate it. Are there any closing comments or questions? We'll have citizens' participation moment.
Do you want to comment from the public on your last?
No, I was asking city staff.
I see.
Right. Excuse me? What did you say? Did you want to say something? No? Okay, folks, before we have citizens' participation, I think that there may be some discussion and discourse between the council members, myself, and let our thoughts be known where we feel we should be going. You want to start off, Councilman Brown?
Go ahead, brother.
Councilman Ross?
I'm not saying nothing, Your Honor.
Uh-oh. Councilman Wilson?
Well, I think we've had an extremely productive and healthy discussion so far. I think we all recognize the realities of the situation. Mark, as the mayor said, you provided an excellent report, and I think I like the comments by Mr. Houchins in the beginning about the need for maybe some innovative thinking. I like the MFR approach, and I'm looking forward to getting reports from that, and I think we're doing a good job. But the reality is that, like Mark says, for the next 12 to 18 months, we have to recognize the reality and deal with it, and I think we're moving in that direction.
Thank you. Councilwoman?
I just want to go over this some more for the next meeting that we have. I appreciate all the information that was presented today, and I know there's some concerns, and I also know that some of the more urban wards need help in a different way than perhaps some of the others do, and I hope that we are well-rounded in how we meet our needs.
Thank you. Councilor Brown?
No, Camelot is for Councilman Brown.
Councilor Brown?
Thank you, Your Honor. First and foremost, I'd like to thank staff, not only for the work for today's workshop, but Mark and I think Steve and Betsy mentioned that there's been tremendous work over the last 4, 5, 6 years incrementally on budget policies, on just changing some of the things we do as far as City Hall that have put us in a position that we are today, that it could have been a lot worse, and that can't be overlooked. And it's been tremendous work done, and just as Councilman Wolfson indicated, this new program that's being implemented, I think it took the last 3, 4, 5 years of that effort to get us to a position where it could be successful. So I sincerely thank you. Couple things, this would be my request list, either for the next scheduled meeting, or leaving the option open that if there seems to be a lot of items still on the table, I'd certainly entertain having a mini workshop before the final day so we don't have to feel rushed as an option. But number one is the list. I think it's referred to as the list, the capital list. And maybe this year, since we're pushing those programs off a year, maybe now is the time to take a look at that list. It hasn't been updated, revised, prioritized in a while, and accompanying that list in briefing the City Council, could we express or develop some kind of council policy on how that list is affected? So there's no consent items, there's no augmentation, without some kind of formal process, because we still hear it today that I didn't see it on the list, or how did they get on the list, or why did it get bumped off? That would be my first request. Secondly, the positions, the vacant position list that was provided, could we get into a little more detail on that in briefings over the next month or so? The vacancies as far as how long they've been, what actually is being recruited, the financial impact, Mark, I think you had out of those that 54 or something, they totaled $4.6 million. So just a lot more detail, since that seems to be the crux of our budget each year, these labor costs. Did you indicate it's 75% of our overall budget? Number 3, one thing I did not hear today, and perhaps has been discussed at the department level, but separate from looking at hiring positions or deferring positions, I'd like to see some dialogue on programs and services. From my perspective, I think there's some programs and services offered at the city that we don't need anymore, that are redundant or certainly are in need to be evaluated. And the thought behind that is, if we can take a look at some programs and services that may not be needed today or appropriate today, those positions associated with the programs and services could then be put to some of the more higher priority areas. Conceptually, I would defer completely to the departments. I'm sure they all have a couple programs that they'd like to get rid of, being facetious. And then the final comment would be, was the opening comment, the purpose. I still think we have to better define what the City Council and management staff feel is the purpose of government. And Betsy, in one of your overheads on talking about the Performance Plus, number 3 talks about better results for your customers. I don't think we should lose sight of, that's why we're in business, to serve our customers, the public. But it says, accountability is defined as the willingness and ability to tell taxpayers what they will get in terms of results for the tax dollars invested. That's a pretty good summation of perhaps what we can do. It would certainly help me in just, especially some of these high costs as public safety. What are they getting from the accountability standpoint? If we're criticized, once in a while we do get criticized in government, but it usually comes down to that accountability spectrum. And, if we could, as part of this process, especially this new Performance Plus process, really focus in on that, I think it would be very beneficial. But thank you. Once again, I think staff has done a tremendous job. I appreciate all the effort that's been put into it. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you very much. All right, we'll wind up by me saying that I think the process was a very worthwhile process today, where everybody expressed their positions, and I think basically you summed it up, Betsy, as far as the performance management is concerned and what our obligations and responsibilities are. I think as long as you tell the people the truth, they're ready to accept it. It may be bad news when we tell them about the C-tax, that we have to tighten our belt and we have to look at certain programs in a different light than we did before. But they always accept the truth. It's an interesting phenomenon. Do everything you can to protect us from Carson City. You know, it's so easy for these folks to leave Las Vegas and go up there. How far is Carson City? What is it, 300 miles, 400 miles? You know, 500 miles. You know, they go up there and they forget where they came from. And they live here, and their kids use our parks, and their kids use our facilities. For some reason, they think that they don't have to protect us. I think that's their obligation, and not to rob us, but to protect us. And I hope that message is loud and clear up there. Okay, thank you very much. This is time for citizens' participation. Public comment during this portion of the agenda must be limited to matters with a motion. Sorry.
Thank you, Your Honor. I don't want to be too redundant. I do want to thank staff for their participation today. Without them, this city would be in really, really bad shape. I think it's important that the council members contact those people at the legislative level that we come in contact with and that we're friends with, or that represent our areas as well as what we do, and let them know how we feel about what they do up in Carson City and how it affects us and what we're trying to do, and that we aren't the fat cat that they sometimes think we are. In my motion, I want to make sure that all the comments made by the council members, I know that sitting here, I learned a lot how my fellow council members and the mayor feels on a lot of different items, and we've been able to share ideas at these type of venues that have been, I think, helpful to not only the council members, but as well as the city staffers also. And I want city staff to know that I appreciate their efforts. That's from the bottom line person to the administrators. I think that they do a fantastic job for us. And during this time, if they will bear with us when we try to make some of these tough decisions, and why we do what we do, and I think all of us will be glad to give reasons why we ask for different positions or whatever. And I think that we will all share in the decision-making process. And with that, I want to incorporate all those comments made on record into my motion, and just ask that staff continues to follow our directions and come back with us. And like Councilman Brown said, if we need to have a mini meeting, we can have a mini meeting. But I think with that, I think staff pretty well knows what we're going to try to do here. That'd be my motion, Your Honor.
All right, let's vote on that, please. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Mr. Jervy?
I was waiting for citizen participation, Your Honor.
All right, well, Mr. Gallego, All right, fine. Yes, Mr. Jervik.
If you call citizen participation
Okay,
order.
citizens' participation. Public comment during this portion of the agenda must be limited to matters within the jurisdiction of the city council. No subject may be acted upon by the city council unless that subject is on the agenda and is scheduled for action. If you wish to be heard, please come up to the podium and give us your name for the record. And let's have a 3-minute timer on, even for Mr. Jervik.
Thank you, Honor. Brad Jervik, 400 Stewart Avenue. I told Councilman Wilson this might be a good opportunity to give you a real quick update on what's going on with our lawsuit with the FAA and the right-hand turn. Between now and the next council meeting, it's entirely possible that Tuesday of next week, the FAA will begin using the right-hand turn. So this is the last opportunity at a public meeting to update anybody who's watching this on TV and update the council as a group. Just taking a few moments. As you know, the city, through its outside counsel, filed a lawsuit with the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals challenging the administrative decision by the FAA to implement the right-hand turn. We had a mediation scheduled for March 6th of last week. We had a pretty long conversation that continued on to March 7th, at the end of which we asked the FAA to please stay implementation of the right-hand turn pending an opportunity to sit down face-to-face and have serious talks about the lawsuit and some alternatives. The FAA indicated that they were not interested and would not stay this action, and they do plan to implement as of right now on March 20th. 2 days ago, I directed our outside counsel to file an emergency motion with the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals to ask the Ninth Circuit to stay the action of the FAA. As the mayor knows, as an attorney, and Councilman Wilson knows, stays are pretty rarely granted, and in this situation, it's very hard to read. It's a very good motion, and I think it's based clearly on the fact that the FAA simply did not comply with the rules that require that they examine air quality as part of their study. The administrative record is completely devoid of any record that they tried to make on air quality, and we're going to ask the circuit to stay based upon that. One, until the end of the lawsuit challenging the whole administrative action, but if they won't do that, at least until we can get more administrative record and brief the whole injunction issue, which would give us some breathing room to bring to the court's attention the seriousness of this underlying problem. Between now and the next council meeting, if people start hearing planes flying overhead, it's because we did not get our stay on the 19th, and it'll be because the FAA decided to implement. One more quick thing I want to bring to the council's attention, and I will say this, I will just tell you, the FAA has decided, at least for the first 90 days, to implement this right-hand turn in a very special way. The planes are going to take off a little slower, and they're going to be spread out a little further. What that's going to mean is they're not going to impinge on Nellis's airspace in all likelihood, and they're going to generate less noise. The reason this is important is because if complaints are received within the first 90 days, there may be some adjustment to this. But if they decide to deliberately implement it in a way that minimizes the chance of complaints, at the end of 90 days, they can crank this thing up full speed, so to speak, space the planes closer together, accelerate them so they make more noise, but then it'll be past any period where you can do some meaningful comments about the noise.
Mayor
So-
Goodman?
Yes.
Is that what they admitted to you on the record that they were going to do?
No, they didn't admit this on the record. This is in an email to me from our consultant, George Williams, who is talking with Barbara Lichman. It would normally be privileged, and I consider it privileged, but I think it's vital to release this to people, because I think if this starts up next week and people are bothered by the noise, they need to complain, knowing it's only going to get worse after 90 days. That's
Well,
my opinion.
My suggestion, Mayor Goodman, if you will, is it's nice, and thank you for doing this report during this citizen participation, but I think we need to go a little bit more public with what you're talking about. And we'll have more further discussions on that, but I think that that's crucial to our overall review and watchful eye of what is going to take place in the next 90 days. Secondly, we're filing the moving papers seeking the stay or the prevention of the implementation of the right turn. Do we have any idea when the circuit will hear our motion? Will it be before the 20th?
Well, we've prayed for relief by the 19th of March. That's on the face of the petition. The circuit's a circuit. I think that they understand that it's vital that we know this right now, and so we're hoping. We'll keep you informed day by day if something changes.
You know, Mr. Jervik, whether it's a one-judge decision or is it a three-judge panel that makes a decision?
I believe it's a three-judge panel.
All right, if you find out the names of the judges, in advance, I'd certainly like to know them.
I will bring that to your attention, Your Honor.
I think that in large part will give us a clue as to which way they're going to be going. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yes, Al Gallego, citizen of Las Vegas. First, I want to thank the city council for having the meeting locally instead of 300 miles away like in that other city down the road a couple of years ago. I can't afford the gas anymore. First, I want to say there's city staffers that are very, I don't know what the word is. They walk away when our part of the meeting comes to. They walk away. They don't want to listen to what we want to say. And I'm not going to say who they were, but I saw them walking out the door, and it's very rude. Very rude. Now, I have several questions, remarks in everything that we had today, and one of them is that the city of Las Vegas is losing a lot of money by letting the county use the name Las Vegas. The casinos, everybody's address. My daughter just bought a house way out there almost in Mesquite, and they're using the name Las Vegas in their address. We should have a fee or something so we can collect a little bit of money, because I can see that this city is going to the dogs. In a matter of time, we're going to be broke. We're not going to have any money. All our park services are going to go to hell. Another big problem that I have, and I hope the gentleman's still here, is our court system over there on the Regional Justice Center. We have employees, city employees over there that were hired that are not doing the job. They were hired because they have friends that are in high management, and they brought them in to work there, and they're not doing their job. They're being very lax about it. The people, they can't take care of them. Another problem that I have is the rainy day funds. We better put that in place, because we have a situation here in Las Vegas, and I have brought it up again, and one of the fire chiefs is here, and Mayor, you started it. On Bonanza Road, this race that we're going to have in a couple of weeks, they're stacking thousands and thousands of tires on city property. Have you ever seen what happens when fires start fires? You'll never be able to put it out. We had a fire in California that lasted 9 months. They could not put it out. And we have thousands of tires here with a little rickety fence that I can push with one finger. The homeless are stealing tires from that place and selling them to tire companies. They don't have no control there. They need to do something about it before we have a disaster. A big, big disaster. And I am afraid that if that tires catch fire, we'll all be dead. Thank you for letting me speak. Thank you.
John McGowan, resident of the Arts District in Ward 3, and candidate for election as mayor of the city of Las Vegas. You were previously and repeatedly told of the need for public mass transit along Casino Center Boulevard to serve residents of the Arts District on First Friday. But you ignored that need as well as the simple solution to it. I recommend and request, first may I have the overhead, please? You'll take a look at the exhibit.
Is it a picture or?
It's an exhibit. There it is. You can see what it is. I recommend and request you direct implementation of the herein prescribed alternative route for the citywide bus system between the hours of 9 a.m. and 11 p.m. on each First Friday and during the Vegas Grand Prix event. The written text of my public comment is submitted and requested inclusion in the meeting minutes, as well as copied to all 7 members of the City Council, expressly including those who seek re-election to public office. First do your job, then seek re-election. Incidentally, what I meant to say earlier if you would have allowed public comment on the non-public pertinent issue of the budget, is this. You haven't even scratched the surface of creative innovation yet, but you're beginning to tend towards it, little by little. I'll accelerate that process for you.
Yes, sir?
Good afternoon. Is this thing on? Okay.
Yes, it is.
Mayor, City Council, citizens of Las Vegas. My name is Carl Medonic. Just sitting here, I've been listening about the budget. Excuse me, I'm talking. Well, anyways, sometimes as citizens we get, we're forgotten people. And I sometimes believe the City Council or the Mayor doesn't even listen to us. But I have something to say. I love this city. And I want to tell you an example what the city of Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada did. If you throw trash on the streets, there's a $1,000 fine. I think you see that here, happen here, to help with the budget. Another thing too I like to say, I know that the city council and the mayor hates this word, homeless. Well, I'm homeless myself. And it's hard to find affordable housing here in Las Vegas. All they do right now is cater to the outside people. And us citizens of Las Vegas were forgotten again. Just like myself, I'm on disability. All I make is $623 a month. I'm 57 years old. I go to a senior citizen place. They want $700 more. Stop story. So that's my main street. You find a lot of homeless people out trying to find work. Some of them got part-time jobs. They can't find affordable housing. And I can't help it that I'm homeless. A lot of those people can too. And last of all, our city is growing so fast. Our highways are getting so congested and everything. Our highways can't handle the traffic anymore. And when Oscar gets elected as our next mayor again, I'm going to keep hounding him about this. What we need is mass rapid transit. And I believe it was 5 or 6 years ago I gave him a bunch of pamphlets from San Francisco Bay Area rapid transit. And I'm pretty sure he read them. I like to see a system like that here, either elevated rail system or underground, because our traffic is getting so bad, more accidents, and with a mass transit, it'll move people faster from Laughlin to Boulder City, Las Vegas, North Las Vegas. So we need to get something done. Thank you.
Mr. McDonough, are you homeless now? Because you weren't.
I went to a couple of places to see, you have to be 55 and over to stay at the senior citizen place. They want $700 more bucks.
All right,
I can't even afford that. All I get is $623.
We're going to help you because you did a good job before, and we're very proud of you.
Thank you.
And we're not going to allow that condition to exist. Here's Dr. Morris. She's going to take care of you. Right over there. She'll take care of you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, anybody else like to be heard? All right, the special city council meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Good.